hybrid policy that can be found on our website. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability and or an extraordinary circumstance. Excused members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. Members who are joining via Zoom must leave their cameras on. This meeting is being streamed live on our YouTube channel, and a transcript is being recorded. And of course, if anyone's interested, they can always go back to the YouTube channel and watch a recording of this meeting. Like I said, Janine, we have quorum. So everyone, we have a pretty packed agenda. I have some updates, but I think I'm going to save them for the end with new and old business, because we can get right into our agenda. Like I said, it's a pretty big agenda. Do we have the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice here?
I'm online. Hi there, Jordan Salinger.
Hey, Jordan, how are you? So I just want to preface this. Thank you, Jordan. I want to preface this. Some of you know I have been, ever since the mayor formed this agency, what is it, office, I guess, or a combined office?
It's combined office, yes.
Combined office. We have been on them for about, I think it's been maybe 2 years to get them to come. And I know they were kind of a skeleton crew for a while, but they finally have been, I guess, hiring and shored up a little bit. So, the reason why I particularly, and Marty as well, particularly wanted to connect with the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice is because it's somewhat of a new combination of how it's, I guess, attacking these problems, and B, to see how we can join with the Mayor's Office and initiatives specifically in our district, and what they're prioritizing, what we're prioritizing, and how we can work together. So, Jordan, I can't even tell you how happy I am that you're here. So go ahead, why don't you go with your presentation of an introduction, and then we'll probably have some questions for you.
Sure, happy to do that. I believe Janine is going to be pulling up the slides. But hi everyone, Jordan Salinger, Deputy Director for Adaptation Strategies at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Justice. As mentioned, this is a new office, although there are parts that may be familiar to you. We combined the offices of resiliency and sustainability in a new office of urban agriculture, as well as prior mayor's offices of environmental remediation and environmental coordination, all into one mega office under the Adams administration. And looking forward to giving a brief update on all the things we do, and happy to take some time at the end to address questions on any of the things that I quickly go over. Can folks see slides? Are there slides up?
Not yet.
Give me one moment. Sorry, I'm waiting for it to finish that one.
Jordan, can you say your title again, Deputy Director?
For adaptation strategies.
Adaptation, okay, thanks.
Tom, you know what, Janine, can you mute Tom because he keeps popping up, or?
Sure.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Marty, I would Marty leave that because Janine's doing it for all.
All right. I think we're all seeing it. So if you could go to the next slide. So our mission is to develop world-leading climate policies and programs with innovation, creativity, and inclusivity to improve quality of life now and into the future, addressing the drivers of climate change, achieving environmentally and economically just outcomes for all New Yorkers. And so, I think what that means in practice is really working with the dozens of city agencies to make sure that climate thinking is embedded in all decisions. And you'll see the kind of myriad of ways that we're attempting to do that across the city. Next slide. So I think this is important to really show the ambitious climate agenda and goals that we have in terms of our emissions targets. We have a goal of 100% reduction emissions by 2050. We're focusing on what we know to be the kind of biggest source of emissions are our buildings in New York. That's obviously a little bit different from other cities where transportation is the biggest. Transportation is significant, but a lot of our effort has been on, will continue to be on kind of the largest buildings and getting to carbon neutrality from those buildings by 2050, and reducing embodied carbon by 50% by 2033. And so folks don't know, embodied carbon is really all the effort that it takes in the construction and the processes by which we kind of build throughout the city. Next slide. So we know that climate change is here, it exists, we felt it, whether it's through Sandy or Ida or different climate events, the smoke from last summer. So these are the threats that we're guarding against. Talked about the least, but is the deadliest of our climate threats is extreme heat. We expect to see 4 times as many heat waves, so days above 90 back to back to back by 4 times by the 2080s. Extreme rainfall, like I mentioned, Ida, Ophelia, a number of the kind of big rain events that have really shocked us. Up to 22% more precipitation by the 2080s. And then, I think what has been maybe our primary focus over the last decade post Sandy is coastal surge and chronic tidal flooding. We know that sea level rise has already happened. We already have about a foot higher over the last century, and we expect to see close to 4 feet of sea level rise by the 2080s. Next slide. So all those projections you just saw, it comes from our work with the NPCC. It's the New York City Panel on Climate Change. It's really a unique thing that we have as part of the city. If you're familiar with the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, this is our downscaled version. We have the unique opportunity to work with academics across the region to focus on these projections, the risks we see, the risks we talk about a little bit less, but obviously could be problematic, drought, groundwater, and so it's something that all of our work is grounded in. Worth noting that the most recent version of NPCC, NPCC4, was released last month, and is really worth checking out. And once again, is something that is firm in all of our work. Next slide. So, be remiss, obviously, not to mention Sandy, and as I said before, is something that can be clear that the city was caught off guard, and I think no one expected. I think there were some projections, but certainly an event of that severity with 44 lives lost. We'll say that I think that was a call to action, and over the last decade, there has been tremendous progress, certainly on our coastal resilience, and I think we have become a global leader in this. There's much more work to do, and I will get into that in a moment. But I think the question is, are we safer 10 years after Sandy? The answer is demonstrably yes, but there's a lot more work still to be done. Next slide. So in terms of the approach, I think it's worth noting this for our coastal resilience infrastructure, and then I'll get into some of the projects. We try where we can to address multiple hazards. So it's can we both protect against the surge and address extreme rainfall. A lot of our projects have, whether it's a berm or a wall, but what's less seen is the kind of dramatic and very expensive drainage upgrades, pump stations, and so try to really address multiple hazards in the same project. We're planning for future risk. We use those projections from NPCC to come up with our standards. Where possible, we try to prioritize the most vulnerable populations. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the Sandy money was directed to areas that were kind of most impacted and had federal resources. But a lot of our work and a lot of our work moving forward is focusing on those who are most vulnerable. We recognize that not all projects are going to look the same, and you can see that across our Lower Manhattan portfolio, that they all look a little bit different. They reflect the unique urban character, and it's a community integrated approach, and that is because of our robust community engagement for all of those projects. Literally hundreds, if not thousands, of meetings for each project, and something that we felt has made all of the efforts much better through community engagement. Increasingly, we try to incorporate natural and nature-based solutions. Not always something that works. Green infrastructure is nice and helpful, but in some cases we do rely on gray and kind of more traditional infrastructure, but where possible, try to incorporate natural and nature-based solutions. Next slide. So I think this is important, a map to show the scale of work across the city. You'll note that some of these are city-led projects. There's others that are state, and some involve partnerships with our federal partners, notably the Army Corps of Engineers. I mentioned before the work in Lower Manhattan, the East Side Coastal Resilience, and I won't go through all of them, but a number of capital projects in Lower Manhattan alone. There's $1.7 billion worth of capital projects that are ongoing. There's more work that needs to be done, including advancing some work with our partners at Battery Park City Authority. But that's one set of projects. We have what we call a raised shoreline effort that is citywide, that focuses on raising streets, bulkheads to address sea level rise. I talked about our Army Corps of Engineers work recently. The South Shore of Staten Island Coastal Storm Risk Management Project released its first contract. It's a massive, almost $2 billion effort. And so, once again, a lot happening, a lot more needs to happen. Other two notes on this slide is that for quite a while, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice played, I would say, kind of a project management role for some of these efforts. Increasingly, as they become actual projects and need to be operated, we have moved that effort to DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. We named a new deputy commissioner for coastal resilience, Lorian Farrell, who started with us about 6 months ago. And once again, as these projects start to be delivered and need to be operated, this is work that office will be doing. I did not mention yet, but I know this community board has weighed in on the past for the U.S. Army Corps HATS, Harbor and Tributary Study. It's a mega effort, a mega study, more than $50 billion worth of projects. Happy to get into it in the Q&A after. I think it's worth noting that it certainly could be a generational investment from the federal government. We have issues with certain components of the plan, but our role is really making sure that it's delivering the most for New York City. And that we don't pass by this generational opportunity for funding. Next slide. So I think this maybe foreshadows this slide about making sure that these projects aren't just tall walls and that we're able to provide co-benefits. This is a picture of a completed section of ESCR, East Side Coastal Resilience, where the flood wall is actually embedded in the landscape, and there's opportunities to get to ferries, get to the waterfront. These projects do require, these coastal projects do require a lot of space, but I think we've shown that they can be done in ways that don't cut people off from the water. Next slide. So wanted to highlight another program of ours. It's a new effort. It's called Climate Strong Communities. It is kind of the next generation of climate resiliency planning and projects, focusing on some of the gaps I talked about before, about how some of the funding spread across the city, really focusing on areas that didn't receive as much Hurricane Sandy recovery funding. This is a kind of a multi-hazard approach in terms of adaptation projects. So not just coastal, but focusing on extreme rain and heat mitigation projects. We have a community-centered planning that is kind of bolsters the effort, all with the target of going after the Inflation Reduction Act dollars and infrastructure dollars that are coming out of the federal government right now. We really want to make sure that New York City receives its fair share, if not more, and so are seizing on the moment to push forward some planning and project ideas. Next slide. So another prong of our work is our climate resilient design guidelines. We are now on version 4.1. There may be a 5.0 in the future, but it's really thinking about all city actions, and if you're thinking about a school that is being reconstructed or a firehouse, what are the kind of thinking going into the effort? How are we making sure that everything is raised to the proper level, that we're using the right materials? This is an effort that's been very successful, and once again is maybe not something kind of a silver bullet solution, but is really about embedding climate thinking in our process. Next slide. Another way we're trying to do that is climate budgeting. This is a new effort. The first climate budget report came out last month. And so it makes sure that, once again, that we are thinking through whenever there's a street, whenever there's kind of any city action, that we are grading ourselves on what we're doing right, what needs to be done better. And I would say this is the first year for this effort, and I'm very hopeful that we're able to continue and expand and make sure that at the end of the day that our spending reflects the climate science, and that once again all decisions have this thinking embedded within it. Next slide. So something that I haven't gone into as much, but certainly where our office spends a lot of time is the Climate Mobilization Act, Local Law 97, incredibly ambitious, first of its kind legislation that focuses on our largest buildings. This is a Herculean effort across the city. I would say very positive that most 90% of buildings are already in compliance right now. There are stricter standards moving towards 2030. But this is really about, it's not about imposing fines or penalties, but how can we all come together and make sure that our buildings are as green as possible and not further contributing to pollution. And so we have the New York City Accelerator program that is kind of a way that larger buildings can kind of raise their hand and say, we don't know exactly what to do. We want to comply. How can you help? And so that's an effort that our office focuses on. Next slide. And then I know I highlighted this earlier as well, but how can we support low carbon construction? to meet that goal of reducing our carbon footprint by 50% by 2034. It really, involves research, working with our city agencies, private sector, to focus on the different materials and the kind of the way that we construct. We have a picture of mass timber here. The concrete, can't remember the number offhand, but it might be, I think, up to 30% of our emissions within the building sector on kind of dirtier concretes. And so, where can we be innovative? Worth noting that one of our climate coastal projects, the Battery Coastal Resilience, was awarded the highest award for its use of building materials and barging rather than trucking. And so it's kind of pairing, as we're adapting our coastline, how are we not making the problem worse? Next slide. And then I think, how can be a presentation without from team focusing on environmental justice without mentioning the report that we released this past April. It's a fairly groundbreaking to really focus on where the city can do better, where the kind of history of environmental injustices, where the kind of gaps in services, where our burdens felt most acutely. And as part of this effort, in addition to this report, we have a map that our office released that has hundreds of layers showing kind of pollution and once again, how over decades, as we kind of came together as a city, how some of these disparities exist. It's really the kind of first stage for our office is identifying the problem. Moving forward, we'll have a roadmap to help close some of those gaps. But I think it's a pretty novel and important piece of report that we were able to release a couple months ago now. And then I wanted to land on final slide. We could go to the next one. Number of items we've gone into detail here, but this is really the things that we're going to be focusing on in 2024. Number of these we've hit with the release of that plan I mentioned, the climate budgeting effort that is kicked off. I'd say a couple other things to focus on is really extreme heat, as I talked about, the kind of deadliest of our climate threats. Focusing on increasing the forest plan to get to our goal of 30% tree canopy, currently at 22%, but what is standing in the way of us increasing our tree canopy? Focusing on electrifying our school buses. We've had great success in driving money to that effort. And so I would say it's a lot of the stuff that we've been working on, but not everything. And so just thank you for the opportunity to give you a brief overview of the things we do.
Thank you so much, Jordan. This was great. And we really welcome that, at least the first introduction to your office for us. And I know a lot of the topics that you talked about are big, meaty topics, and how it would, kind of apply to our district will be an interesting matchup. But I'm going to I have a lot of questions, as I'm sure everyone here will probably imagine. But I'm going to go to the committee first. Josephine, and then Matt, and we can go around the room.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious to know what your office is doing about food waste. I didn't hear much about sort of like preemptive measures that you're taking. There seems to be a lot of wall buildings and stuff like that, building of walls to protect the coastline. But what are the sort of preemptive measures that you're taking, like in terms of food waste?
Absolutely. So I would say that's a big part of the set of issues that we face. Our office, we have advisors who work with Department of Sanitation on that issue. I know that I've recently sat through a presentation on the the kind of all the sources and challenges and kind of new complications within the sanitation stream, I would say that I would maybe direct folks from DSNY to join the next meeting to talk specifically about that one.
Thank you.
Matt.
Hi, Jordan. Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if your office produces, it looks like you have some great reports there, but just to drill down a bit on some of the capital projects in different neighborhoods and communities, specifically in Community Board 4, just curious if there's more information to be found that you could provide about capital projects that you're currently working on in our Community Board district.
Yeah, great question. I know that a couple of different agencies have produced, the different sources for that. I think city planning has a capital project tracker that is probably the kind of best way to get a sense of all the different efforts. I think obviously, green infrastructure is something, rain gardens, something that we see across the city. And so those are the sort of things that show up in that. So I would say that's probably the best way to see kind of all the efforts ongoing in CB4. It's also the deputy mayor for operations has a tracker as well. But I would say the city planning one is a little bit better and more up to date. And so I think that's the one that I'd start with.
Your slide in this stack didn't show any projects for this community board in the way I saw that slide.
So great question. And so that was specifically focusing on coastal projects. And I once again, I had heard there have been conversation about the Army Corps work. And so I guess I will give some background. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a region-wide study for this area, including potential protections for CB4 as part of, they looked at a range of different alternatives, harbor-wide gates, entirely on-land measures, and they landed at alternative, I believe, 3B, which is a kind of a mixture of in-water gates and on-land measures. And specifically for this neighborhood, it did show on-land kind of protections at the edge. I will be clear that, I think I can clearly see challenges in what they were showing of kind of large 15-foot plus walls. But I think, my larger point on this is that, I think that was their first effort at, kind of lines on a page. And I don't think that, we should take any of it truly at face value and is kind of their first salvo. And so it's incumbent on all of us to say, here are the things that we like, here are the things that we don't like. I think very clearly providing coastal protection to this neighborhood is something that would be important given the coastal risk. So
you may know that we wrote a letter damning that wall.
Yes, I'm aware.
And then I think.
So Jordan, thank you very much for the presentation. I have to say it's very encouraging to see that the city is investing in the climate resiliency of the city. That's very encouraging. I was also surprised to learn, I think you said that 90% of big buildings in the city are already compliant with local law 97.
Correct.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Because the reason I ask is because I inherited the opposite, that there was very little compliance from the big buildings. And that instead that they were looking to delay implementation of local law 97, delay having to do reporting, delay this, delay that, out many years. Can you tell me where you got your data in terms of this supposed compliance?
Or what's the definition of large buildings?
There's a very definition, yeah, there is. I think it's 50,000 square feet, isn't it? Sure. Yeah,
I believe that's right, and happy to send an email with the exact square footage. I believe that number is correct. So, I think you raise a good point. There was work with Department of Buildings, who's enforcing this local law to make sure that, obviously because of some of the challenges during COVID, that this was not a overly punitive program, and so there was some kind of extension and delaying a bit of the implementation, but the kind of the 2030 target remains. And so, I think to your point, some of it is not necessarily as strict for 24, but increasingly it will be strict, and some of those penalties are real. But once again, I think the point of the program is not to collect money. The point of the program is to make sure that our buildings comply, and it's not full electrification overnight. There are smaller things that can be done, replacing insulation, improving the lighting. And so I think that's my understanding, is that some of the kind of smaller moves we'll do over the next couple of years, and then it's really towards 2030 where we're looking to do some of the more significant capital intensive work to get the buildings in compliance.
is your office going to keep track of that compliance, or is that gonna be another building, another agency?
It's Department of Buildings, and so they were recently awarded additional funding to kind of build out a team to do that compliance work. And so, I would say kind of our office is advisory and helping to make sure that the policy is as strong as possible. And I would say similar to how I described the coastal projects, with our office helping to kind of form and set the elevation standards. It's then up to DEP to make sure that workers are out there opening the gates and that it's performing. So I would say a similar process by which we do the initial work, and our agencies are ultimately responsible for enacting it.
Thank you.
David?
Hi, Jordan. For, I think, the better part of a year, this board has been largely consumed with deliberations about a project that would destroy the buildings on 2 NYCHA campuses. They cover over 3 city blocks and include over 18 buildings with steel frames up to 25 stories tall. We're being told by NYCHA that it would cost as much to renovate them as to replace them with new buildings. I think it would help us a lot if we could quantify the climate impacts to help us weigh one project against the other. And, I'm an architect. It's a long held truism that the most sustainable building is the one that already exists. And I think this has to do with embodied carbon. And the replacement buildings, of course, calculated into their embodied carbon should be the energy consumption and the waste of demolishing the buildings to make way for them. Is your office in a position to help us quantify the embodied carbon of one project versus another?
It's a good question. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. I think traditionally, a lot of our focus is on our own projects, and focusing on how can we make our new affordable housing, our coastal projects as green as possible. Happy to get back to you on it. I think obviously don't want to speak to NYCHA's effort, but appreciate the question.
Thank you. It would be very helpful.
I just have, hi, I'm Lisa. Good evening, Jordan. I just have a question about funding, really. The map showed, at least for coastal projects, what's city versus federal, and the federal is all, it looks like Army Corps of Engineers coastal projects, but that was a map of coastal projects, right? not
Correct.
everything that you.
It was, yeah, exclusively coastal projects, yes.
There was one blue dot, so the state is not very active in any of what you showed us in terms of sources, who's running the project. I guess my question is, for all the work you're doing, how much is federal, how much is state, how much is actually city? Not who controls the projects, but where's the funding from for the city projects? I am thinking towards the election. And,
Sure. So it's a great question,
Sure.
and I'm not sure if I can nail the percentages, but I would say, certainly post Sandy, was a kind of infusion of dollars from the federal government through either FEMA or through HUD. And so if you look at the kind of makeup, a lot of those, let's use the Lower Manhattan coastal resilience projects. A lot of them started, East Side Coastal Resilience was a $300+ million grant from HUD, and then followed by $1 billion in city capital. And so I would say that, that is a pretty standard pattern of the federal money being significant, but not necessarily covering the full cost of the coastal projects. I would say that, coastal projects in particular are, wildly expensive. I talked about the overall number for the HATS effort being $50+ billion. And so, I think my kind of larger point here is, even with the pretty groundbreaking opportunities coming from the federal government right now out of IIJA and IRA, most of those are not sufficient for coastal projects. We are using most of those dollars for dealing with extreme rain or heat mitigation. There's one program in particular, FEMA's BRIC, Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities. It's really the kind of largest grant opportunity. It's capped at $50 million. And so, some of these coastal projects are $1 billion. And so, it's important. It's part of the equation. But it's really kind of, I would say that the challenge is all hands on deck, and we need city dollars, we need federal dollars, we need state dollars to address the crisis.
Marty.
This is Marty. Hey, I also have a funding question, and then I have a second question. The funding question relates to what Val, David, and Lisa said. It's particularly with regard to Local Law 97. Local Law 97 for existing buildings, it will result in very expensive retrofits. Are you helping landlords and building owners with those retrofits, and are you finding money for them? Or is it all on them?
Yes, so go ahead.
For that, if you can't find the funding, are you devising a means to get those buildings up to as low emissions as possible, but not necessarily up to the Local Law 97 levels?
Great questions, and happy to invite my colleague Joe Chavez, who's really kind of running that program, to meet with you all to talk in more detail. I know he had mentioned that there's kind of ongoing conversations, I believe, with folks at Penn South on some of their work, and the program that we really rely on is the Accelerator. It's New York City Accelerator. It's a program that helps folks work through the challenges. This is not, retrofitting a building is not an easy process, but this is something that we're looking, is really a resource. And I would say directly on the funding side, I know there's efforts. I mentioned IRA and IIJA. There are pretty big kind of dollar opportunities for building retrofits as part of some of the grant programs coming out of those bills. And so I know there's some kind of efforts to go after some dollars to help support as well.
But there's no talk about accepting less than Local Law 97 levels at some point in the future?
a good question. I maybe defer to my colleague Joe to maybe follow up with you directly on that one. But that's not my understanding.
So here's my second question, and this is sort of a lead into the next presenter. In your presentation, you said barging rather than trucking. The Hudson River Gateway is at a project, as I understand it, I think they're online, I'm speaking to them as well, has said that they are trucking waste through the tunnel and out, and several times that I've asked this question, they said they're looking into barging, but I have not heard back. Do you know anything about that? I had to turn it into a question at the end, rather than a statement.
So I don't know if Rebecca, I see
Oh,
you.
sorry.
I guess.
So Drew, are you on? Hi, Marty. It's Rebecca. We're on the call. We have a whole suite of team here.
Yeah,
Do you want
okay,
us to answer this now, or do you want us to talk about this when after we give our presentation?
I just picked up on something he said. I don't need to give you the floor right now, and you can lambast me later.
Thank you.
I guess I'll just say, obviously there's a lot of different ways to focusing on reducing embodied carbon, whether it's through different materials, different construction practices, and I think none of this happens overnight. And I think it's there's certain situations where you're precluded from barging. It doesn't happen on all of our coastal projects, and so I think it's a ongoing process.
Thank you for the answer.
Jordan, I think maybe what Marty might be saying is if you can put the pressure on the Gateway project as well, if the mayor's office can help us out, it's one thing if the community board writes a letter, but if the mayor's office kind of gets together with some of our requests, and it would be helpful.
It does seem like you guys are already doing a pretty good job.
Let's see.
But heard.
I do have a few questions, and I guess some of them a lot of them are specific to our district, and I know a lot of what you talked about is very macro, and I get that. This is a city agency, and you're looking at the big picture, so I'm gonna talk some macro, some micro. The one thing that our committee has been pretty vigilant on, has been with another New York City agency, which is EDC and Shore Power. Our district, registered as one of the dirtiest airs in all of New York City, not just Manhattan, all of New York City. And a lot of that is attributed to the huge cruise ships that are coming in there all the time. So I was wondering, we actually, and I'll update the committee too, we're gonna get an update from EDC next month, it looks like on that. But I was wondering if that was on your radar, if you're working with them on shore power. I know there's a different version of shore power, or same version in Brooklyn, but at least with the Manhattan Cruise Ship Terminal, and how involved is this office with EDC on that?
Great question. Other folks in my office, we have an energy team. I know that they work very closely with EDC. There's a similar conversation, obviously, ongoing in Red Hook. So happy to check with them and get an update for you.
Okay, and I foresee a letter coming out, just thanking you for the presentation, and we can definitely list some questions just so you have it in writing, and you don't have to.
That'd be great.
Go back to the YouTube, but we can definitely do that. I saw a slide also on your website. You mentioned e-vehicles. And how that was a big component of kind of getting the city greener. Is there anything on the radar, and I guess this would be with city council as well, but some sort of mandate or some sort of incentive to especially delivery commercial vehicles, all the trucks that come in through the Lincoln Tunnel for us anyway, getting them to electric, and I'm talking more commercial vehicles. I mean, there's definitely personal vehicles, but commercial vehicles are such a bulk of what we see a lot too.
Yes, and so worth noting that it was an announcement on back as part of the state of the city for a new office of sustainable delivery. kind of an offshoot of DOT. That focuses on this. You know, we know that, you know, e-mobility and the kind of last mile is a kind of a very hot and evolving conversation. I'm offhand, I'm not sure what the targets are, but I'm sure certainly aware that you know that we do have targets. And so, you know, I would say, you know, a lot of this depends on kind of some of the federal resources, as opposed to the coastal projects, which are maybe of too large of a scale to truly benefit from some of these IRA and IIJR opportunities. I know that we are aggressively pursuing federal dollars to kind of improve our own fleet and work with the private sector so that they're doing the same to theirs.
You mentioned the micromobility. We have a nice piece of property called Pier 92. And an RFP is going out, again, EDC, that has been Blue Highway talked about, and we'll put that on your radar, your office's radar, but we can include that as well, as far as micromobility. If you're looking for somewhere to do that. I want to go back to the e-vehicles, because you do mention charging infrastructure. Where is it? Where is the charging infrastructure? We've been here for 5 years talking about charging infrastructure. There is no charging infrastructure. Where is the charging infrastructure?
Great question, and I would say another thing that I will maybe answer in a similar way. You know, we have a team that does focus on transportation. And so you couldn't already tell, I focus largely on our kind of coastal projects and our extreme rain. And so some of these topics I don't have the answer to. I would maybe also answer in a similar way that I know that our grants team is aggressively pursuing a lot of dollars for EV infrastructure. I think there have been some awards, and I think there are a lot potentially pending. So, but I hear you on the urgency. I think I'd certainly like to see more of it as well. But yeah, maybe this is something we include in the letter as well.
Yeah, and just so you know, we're not trying to put you on the spot or not. I mean, these are very big questions and with big answers, but it's more to get on the record, and we can put it in the letter and then work towards it. You know what I mean? As we continue, hopefully working together, because
Absolutely,
we do have some very big, I mean, Gateway is one of them, but we have huge projects, Port Authority, possibly NYCHA, where a lot of these things can be implemented. And if that's highlighted or flagged for you guys, we can work together, you know what I mean, on maybe in hand.
And we can work to arrange other folks from our office to do deep dives on a number of these topics. Once again, I think all of them probably warrant at least as long as the presentation I did on each one of these topics. So it can help to arrange those folks to join you all as well.
And I'm going to reference out an email, and I think you mentioned it, Lorian Farrell, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Coastal Resiliency at DEP.
Yes.
I think you offered that she comes to one of our future meetings just on coastal resiliency. We would definitely take you and her up on that. I forwarded you our letter from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and what Marty said about the walls. And you know that we have fully endorsed, along with countless, I think, other environmental organizations, plans 2 and 3A, which puts these barriers way offshore. So we'll talk with her about that and to see like kind of where their head is at. It's obviously a huge project. It's going to take many well, but just to put that on the radar.
Absolutely. She is the city's point on the kind of Army Corps negotiations as well. So I think you know, I think it'd be great to get into this with her.
I do have one education, I guess it's an education question or related. School buses. Not only, I think, do they have to go electric, I think these school buses are like from the 1930s. I mean, I'm behind school buses and they're blowing out smoke like it's like, I mean, like it's like engine, it's like beyond dirty. So, and I know these are all contracted, right, through the city. So what is there any, and again, I'm not saying you have the answers right now, but these are things we're interested in, and can we is there any way to incentivize working with contractors that they turn over or incentivize or something like that?
Yeah, it's really about making sure that there's dollars to replace those buses that you talk about. And maybe I would say, as opposed to some of my prior answers, I know that we've received a number of large grants being able to replace hundreds of school buses already. And so folks from our transportation team have been very successful. Maybe they haven't all hit the streets yet, but we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars already awarded to the city to address this problem.
I only have two more questions. One is, like I said, I know it's macro versus micro. When we talk about maybe advancements in building and green energies, a lot of it is kind of put in the basket of new builds, right? Because new builds can then do anything. I mean, they could put in permeable pavement, and I just didn't know if there was anything on the mayor's radar as, again, I'm sure this is also city council, but putting a, if there's a new build, you have to put permanent pavement. If there's a new, not just hit marks of energy, green energy marks, but actual, if there's a roof, it has to be a green, things like that. Again, this will all be in our
Yes.
letter. Now I'm envisioning might be more like 100 pages, but maybe not. But no.
There was a bill, I believe passed in 2021 called the Unified Stormwater Rule. Really, as you were describing it, is the mechanism by which, whether it's even some of our coastal projects or larger buildings, are required to, whether it's manage stormwater on site, use green infrastructure. And so this is I would say a very effective tool that is in its earlier days, but I would say gets at and ensures that construction moving forward is addressing the stormwater risk.
And Jordan, my last question is, a lot of these issues, I understand this is a whole New York City, but what can we do as a community board to get your attention or the office's attention for some of the specific issues in our district or some of the initiatives in our district? Not to play favorites, but we want our love, right? Like.
Yeah, I think you are already doing some of the right things. I would argue that the kind of advocacy, obviously around some of the congestion pricing conversations, I would say that we're going to need advocacy across multiple policy areas moving forward, and that not all of these some of these projects aren't immediate winners overnight, right? We have coastal project means there's going to be a couple years of construction, which is kind of short-term pain for long-term gain. And it's that's just one of our risks. We have risk from extreme rain. We have risk from heat, and so I think being able to preserve kind of a long-term perspective and just making sure that more people, I think the more people that are involved in the conversations. Once again, not everything is a complete win-win-win. I think we try where we can. If we are doing a coastal project, we try to make sure that we're adding a playground, adding extra green space. But these are hard conversations, but it seems like you are all approaching it the right way.
Thank you very much, Jordan. For anyone else?
I want to make another comment. Jordan, in the stormwater management stuff that you were just talking about, the community board has written letters about separating stormwater from sewage in the three major projects that are in our district: the Port Authority, NYCHA, and Hudson Yards, the new Hudson Yards project. That's something you should probably know about, and I hope you'll pay attention to. Each of these projects are sufficiently close to the estuary that it shouldn't be that expensive to put clean stormwater into the river, into the estuary, as opposed to putting it in sewage. After the retention requirements and all of that is taken care of.
Yeah, and so I think worth noting on that is yeah, how much can we delay, right? Is, making sure that we don't have these CSO events. And so, we have what we call blue belts, if you're familiar, on Staten Island, parts of Queens, kind of detention ponds that hold, water while the kind of event is happening, and then, able to release it. So you have, you're limiting the CSO. There's a cloudburst technology is kind of another a suite of projects that we're starting to roll out. You can imagine kind of a basketball court that is sunken, that holds water for the moment, and then after the kind of extreme rain passes, it's able to drain out. And so I think, to your point, the more we can kind of delay those larger CSO events, the better for all of us.
That's it.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan. You're gonna be my new BFF.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
She's writing you a 100-page letter. She's starting to write tonight.
And 100 emails. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're glad we're in contact now, and hopefully we can work together in the future.
Sounds good.
Sorry?
One from the public?
Oh, thank you. You know what, is there anyone from the public, Janine? I'm sorry, Jordan, just to stay on with us. Is there anyone on the public, Janine, that has raised their hand?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring over Arnold.
Oh, Arnold Bob, right? Jordan, I think we have one question for you from the public.
Sounds good.
Let her do it.
Yeah, I'll let her do it. She should.
Yeah, of course. Actually, you know what, Sally from our committee has a question first. Go ahead, Sally. No, it's okay, while they're bringing him.
Okay, yeah, just something occurred to me from all the discussion, things that we've also talked about in the past. Are things like bioswales being addressed and permeable pavement? Every time you put down pavement, and now it's been put throughout the city, where flooding is, and storm is flooding and is potential, are they only using very permeable coverings on the streets?
So those are other tools. And I think our hope is certainly on permeable pavement to accelerate the deployment, because I think that's, exactly the sort of solution that we need more of in the city. You mentioned bioswales. We've really accelerated the rate of those. I know that, as much as we'd like to do that on every corner of the city, using Coney Island as an example, it's not always, sometimes the water table is in fact, too high for that sort of green infrastructure to be effective, but we're trying to do that everywhere that is feasible across the city. So, I think these are, we talked about blue belts, cloudburst, and these are two other critical tools in helping to make sure that excess runoff doesn't hit the sewers and lead to CSO events.
Thank you so much.
But you're right, every time ComEd rips up the street, when they
Yeah,
pave it, they should be, every
Absolutely,
single.
because it happens
little by
all
little.
over the city,
Yeah.
that's constantly happening, and what are they putting on the top?
Exactly, not yet, no. Is Arnold here?
Yeah, can
Janine?
you hear me?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have two things to say. One is about the basketball courts, but I'm going to hold on to that for a moment. The main thing is on coastal resiliency. The east side has protection right now, and we have nothing on the west side. And the New Jersey Hats project isn't going to be done for decades. I happened to be walking past our starred Leahy building a few months back, and I saw something there that cost next to nothing that could actually protect our buildings now if a hurricane hit next year or the year afterwards. And I will show you an image in a moment here if I can on my phone. Let me see if this image comes up. Hang on a second here. This is not going to come up very well. It's called a flood plank. It's called a flood plank, and the Starrett Leahy building has these. They installed them because during Hurricane Sandy, or the last hurricane, their basements got flooded 20 feet. So what they have is these flood planks that they could put in on a day's notice and take out on a day's notice. And if we had these throughout places like Chelsea, if a hurricane hit all of a sudden next year, like for thousands of dollars as opposed to billions of dollars, you would have something. So that's the first question. Why aren't you considering flood planks and possibly subsidizing these for buildings in our places here so we have protection now, not 30 years from now?
Great question. I guess I'll just say, certainly encourage, those sort of investments. I think they are needed. And to your point, yes, the Army Corps project is likely to take a decade, if not decades. So I think we all should kind of move, as quickly as possible to reduce risk now. The city does have a program. It's the Interim Flood Protection Measures, our IFPM program, where we put a combination of HESCO barriers. So just imagine kind of military grade sandbags and tiger dams, which are these inflatable kind of water tubed barriers. I believe we have more than 50 installations across the city, including one in the seaport, while we develop kind of a longer term solution there and to protect some of our critical infrastructure. And so, once again, these are interim measures. I think the flood log system that you're describing is kind of another tool. But I don't think we should turn any of these down. And to your initial point, I don't think we should wait, right?
Yeah,
I think
if you have sandbags, if you have enough water there, those sandbags can go right over. These flood planks will hold a good deal more water than those sandbags will. Are you at least letting people know these exist? Because if people knew they were existed in our neighborhood, they might buy some of those. I think I've seen 2 or 3 other buildings that have these, but if you don't know they exist, so you have to tell people about this. And can you add that to your tools to let people know that they can at least buy them themselves?
absolutely. I know in prior summers, I may bungle the name of the effort, but DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, has had kind of advocacy and PR campaigns about what are all the things that homeowners, building owners can do. Flood alarms, right? If you can kind of, you're able to get a notification. If there's flooding in the basement, some of these temporary barriers you mentioned, flood logs. There's kind of a whole range of others, and I think really appreciate the mention here. I think the hearing from the community board. I know that it's also up to the city, and so that's work that DEP has done in prior seasons, aligning with the hurricane season.
Okay, let me move on to my second question. You mentioned the sunken basketball courts, and I'm going to mention something that Martin probably knows about. We have a active recreation area here in Penn South. There's a blacktop area there. And as it turns out, it's not a sunken court, but it kind of has a cement wall around it. And by taking and putting a gate that could be easily put at the entrance to that blacktop area, it suddenly becomes the equivalent of a sunken basketball court that can hold the water. You don't have to always go and create a sunken basketball court, which costs a lot of money. You can find existing items like this court over here. And I've seen city parks that could be doing the same thing, and it's not being done because nobody's telling them about it. I actually mentioned this to the Parks Department about doing it for one of our courts, and I heard nothing back from them. They talked about it's out of the hurricane zone, it's out of the floodplain, and they did nothing about the protection that this would come to keep the sewage in a flash rainfall, and they did nothing about this. So it's once again education on your part to not only do these sunken basketball courts, but to find the existing areas that you can wall up very simply at their entrances, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'll say that we do Jamaica Houses, NYCHA Development, Queens, where we are building one of these right now. We received a just under $10 million grant from FEMA to advance some cloudburst thinking in East Harlem. And so exactly, I think, kind of lower tech solutions, and just because you're outside of the hurricane inundation zone does not mean that you don't have stormwater risk. These maps look very different. I would encourage you, we do have, New York City has stormwater maps that we released a couple years ago. And the risk, from hurricanes, obviously centered along our coasts, stormwater risk is diffuse across the city. And so would encourage thinking and project ideas like this one.
Let me stop you once again here. You're talking about a $10 million.
I'm sorry, Arnold,
Can I finish my
we have
question?
to
Can I take one more minute here and finish my question?
Sure, I'm gonna give you one
Then
go
I'll
ahead,
leave.
a little, make it short.
To do what I'm talking about in the Penn South area would cost probably $5,000, not $10 million. You're talking about $10 million projects. I want to see the ones that can be done from nickel and dimes also, if you see what I'm saying here. And when you're telling me $10 million, you're not talking to me about the $5,000 one. And I'll end my talk at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, Janine, can you bring over Christine Berthet? I think she has her hand up.
Okay. I don't see a hand, but I'll bring her over anyway.
Yeah, I think she has a question.
Oh, there it goes.
And Jordan, Christine is a co-chair of our transportation committee, also a board member of Manhattan Community Board 4.
Great.
Thank you. Very interesting subject. I have two questions for the speaker. The first one is the Port Authority is in the design phase of their massive Port Authority bus terminal, and we have a number of asks that have been provided by this committee. What is your working relationship and how does it work with your office? Are you supervising those, make sure that they are doing what they should be doing and they should, as much as they should be doing?
Absolutely. So, we do have weekly meetings of kind of capital projects that are advancing across the city with, involvement from, for example, Con Edison, Port Authority. And so those are the sort of projects that we discuss with them. I know colleagues at the Department of City Planning are kind of day-to-day much more involved with those negotiations and ensuring the design meets the needs of the city. So yeah, Department of City Planning leads those conversations. I think you're on mute.
City planning is not an expert on resiliency, and I would have liked to see, and I hope we will put in our letter that your office should link directly with the Port Authority and verify that this office, this committee, and this community board asks are paid attention to and done, because it's much easier for you to drive that ask than for us. And so that would be very helpful. The second thing is that I wanted to mention the parks. Every time they bring a new playground or park, etc., they continue to install concrete and asphalt under the play areas and etc., because it's easier to maintain and it costs less. And it always concerns me that this seems to be such a perfect opportunity to let water to increase permeability. And so what is your policy on that, and what is your role with park as far as changing those policies?
So one of my slides, you showed the climate budgeting. And I think that's, one of the tools where, we're able to kind of take a holistic view of kind of all the capital projects that are going on across the city. To your point, the goals are certainly to kind of increase permeability and to, I mentioned this before, which is to drive the city's tree canopy from where it stands now at 22% to 30%. And that requires not just new kind of lollipop small trees, but making sure that we're properly maintaining those that we have, and that they're kind of able to have additional longevity.
So we had a number of conversation with the Parks Department long time ago, where the preservation of the existing street trees is not as aggressive as I would like, especially in the context of real estate development. We love to cut the trees, especially the old one. And then again, the asphalt issue, I hope you would work with parks to get them to change their policies on those two subjects. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Jordan, Christine brings up a great point that I'll leave with, is that, if you keep saying this agency and city planning, they're not environmental experts, right? And they have their own problems type of thing. And we're hoping, and we'll include in the letter, that the mayor will give you guys teeth to kind of push the environmental agenda when it comes to these, especially the capital projects. I think maybe that's what Christine, might have been alluding to on her first question as well.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
All right. Thank you so much. I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming. And for the committee, we'll talk about the letters after the presentations. But Jordan, we'll definitely be in touch and expect the letter, and I look forward to working with you.
Great.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So is that okay with everyone? I think we'll save the topic because we can go over our letters after. We have two other presentations now. We're gonna go to Gateway. I see Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
How are you?
So Marty and I were briefed on the Gateway. Well, a lot of people have been briefed on the Gateway project, many years in the making. If we want to list the huge capital projects in our area, just add this one, another billions and billions of dollars to the list here. But Rebecca, why don't you go ahead with the presentation, and then I'm sure the committee will have questions for you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next slide. This is my name is Rebecca Zach. I'm the Senior Director of Government and Community Affairs at the Gateway Development Commission. We have a few members of our team who will be speaking to this deck. Thank you for inviting us to be here today. This gives an overview of the agenda that we're going to be talking about. It's meaty, but this is posted on the Hudson Tunnel Project website. And we hope this will be a helpful information for all of you to take in, and we look forward to your questions. Next slide. Since this information is, quite substantial, I just wanted to create some checkpoints throughout the deck that kind of encapsulate what we're trying to talk about. We have completed a major federal environmental review, and the project and construction plans were approved in 2021. As the project moves forward, we'll continue to propose adjustments to this plan. So I'm sure we'll have many more conversations in the future. We are proposing two key changes: tile removal in the Hudson River and temporarily altering the bike and walkways in Hudson River Park. Next slide. Next slide. The need for the project: the existing Amtrak New Jersey Transit rail tunnel beneath the Hudson River must be closed for full reconstruction to repair damage from Superstorm Sandy. In addition, the tunnel is over 114 years old. So I think we can all agree anything that old and that has endured what it has endured needs some help. The need for repair is urgent, and the storm damage continued to degrade the tunnel. The existing train service has 450 trains per day, and it's the most congested point of the Northeast Corridor. The new tunnel will provide train capacity during reconstruction of the existing tunnel, and more importantly, redundancy within the system, which is sorely needed in this area. Next slide. This gives, a very broad and view of like where the project is in between both states. So we start east of Secaucus, New Jersey, snake through New Jersey and through the Hudson River, and then terminates in Penn Station. And the next slide gives a little bit more detail to that. It also gives it a lot of detail to all the project contracts that we have going on. We have 9 contracts for this, and you can see them dotted throughout the alignment of the tunnel. We have construction happening on both sides of the river, right in HYCC3, which is an Amtrak-led contract, and then at Tunnelly Avenue in New Jersey. Next slide. When we briefed Marty and Leslie and Christine, one of the feedback that we got was, let's see an example of what a tunnel boring machine looks like. This is an example of a tunnel boring machine, which you can see is a massive piece of equipment and will be built in a bespoke manner for this project, for the contracts of this project. Next slide. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Sam Bromberg to walk through this process.
Hi, everyone. All right, so as you may already know, the entire Hudson Tunnel project was reviewed per NEPA with a final EIS and record of decision issued back in May of 2021. A Section 4F evaluation was completed as part of that effort. FRA was the lead federal agency and FTA was a cooperating agency. So Section 4F is unique to the US Department of Transportation. Given FRA and FTA are DOT agencies, they're subject to 4F, which actually then applies a different level of review for Section 4F uses and resources, which are defined to include parks and recreational resources, certain natural resources, and historic sites. There are a few project components particular to the Hudson River and Manhattan waterfront that have changed since the publication of the final EIS that we want to draw your attention to tonight. So like Rebecca briefly mentioned, these are 1, the removal of piles in the Hudson River associated with former Piers 68 and 69. So that's right in the area just north of Pier 66, adjacent to West 29th Street. And the vast majority of these piles are below the mud line in the river. And the second change is a reconfiguration of the staging area within the West 30th Street heliport at Hudson River Park. So these project modifications, which Jake, my coworker, will explain in much more detail in just a bit, warrant reconsideration of Section 4F properties. There are 2 4F properties that may be affected by these project changes. The first is the Hudson River Bulkhead, which is a historic property eligible for listing in the National Register. And the second is Hudson River Park, specifically the portion near West 30th Street in the vicinity of the Pier 66 boathouse and the heliport. So I'll just clarify, the park, as you probably know, the park includes both the landside portion we would typically think of when talking about the park, but also the portion of the river extending out to the pier headline, which encompasses the estuarine sanctuary. So just very quickly here, this figure shows the full extent of Hudson River Park in the first gray bracket and the Hudson River Bulkhead in the second gray bracket. And these pink diagonal lines along the shore that sort of hug the pier headline represent that portion of the river that's considered a park resource. And the limited area in the red hatched box is where we're focusing now for the project changes. So I'll pass it over to Jake to talk about those.
Thanks, Sam. So yeah, I'll briefly go over the project activities that are proposed in the Hudson River Park as currently contemplated. So zooming in on that area of the proposed project modifications, you can see a portion of the construction is in the waterside portion of the park that's within the pier headline. And then the other portion is within the landside portion of Hudson River Park. Next slide. So waterside construction activities include the removal of wooden piles, as Sam and Rebecca mentioned, and other obstructions that are associated with the former Manhattan Piers 68 and 69. As Sam mentioned, the majority of these piles are buried below the mudline of the river, and so they're not visible from outside the water and do not provide suitable habitat for aquatic life. Obstruction removal activities will be conducted from barges stationed in the water, and construction equipment could include barge-mounted crane, suction dredging, clamshell bucket, and vibratory hammer. And these construction activities have been developed in consultation with and will ultimately be regulated by the U.S. Army Corps, Coast Guard, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as well as New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So here we just have the conceptual construction staging plan. This is for obstruction removal at former Pier 68, the southernmost pier that we're looking at here. And you can see in green the obstruction removal area, and then around that in blue is the active work area. And this active work area would be sectioned off with marker buoys that are shown in white there. And then here you can just see the same obstruction removal and work area for the obstruction removal activities at former Pier 69, slightly to the north. So obstruction removal work is going to be conducted in 2 approximately 6-month seasons, and this is in accordance with the seasonal in-water work restrictions set forth in the EIS. So these would be between July 2025 and January of 2026, and then between July of 2026 and January of 2027. Proposed construction activities within the landside portion of the Hudson River Park would be located within the southern portion of the West 30th Street heliport. And as was analyzed in the EIS, construction as currently proposed would temporarily impact 2 of the helipads and some other components of the West 30th Street heliport. However, the remaining 4 helipads would remain in operation during this construction. And excavated materials from the landside construction activities would be handled per the FEIS and record of decision. So here you can see the proposed construction staging area on the land side. In red is the construction staging area within Hudson River Park. And in particular, you can see the 2 circular construction access shafts, which should be excavated. That was a change from the FEIS. And in green and blue, you can see the temporarily relocated pedestrian walkway and bikeway. So this configuration for the walkway and bikeway actually substantially improves operations for pedestrians and bikers. This reduces the conflict points between construction vehicles accessing the construction site and entering and exiting the work zone. There's also a number of safety and security measures that would be implemented, including flaggers and pedestrian managers, as you can see there at all of the entrances and exits of the staging area, and some other physical barriers, which I'll get into later on in the presentation. Fencing around the Hudson River Park staging area will be covered with graphic fence wrapping, and that'll be designed in consultation with the Hudson River Park Trust. Lastly, utilities would also be brought over from the 12th Avenue construction staging area. That's the area in the red dotted line you can see on the east on the right portion of your screen. And they'll be brought over to the Hudson River Park construction staging area via a temporary utility bridge. So here's just an example of that temporary utility bridge. This is representative of what could be used over 12th Avenue / Route 9A. So construction in the Hudson River, in the landside portion of Hudson River Park, is going to begin in January of 2025, and would be complete by December of 2027, at which point the park would be fully restored. So again, as a recap, the key changes currently being proposed are pile removal activities, and these would take place within the Hudson River over the course of 2 6-month seasons, and they would temporarily alter the path of boaters traveling along the pier headline within the Hudson River. Additionally, the pedestrian walkway and bikeway between approximately 29th and 30th Street would be temporarily relocated to the west, and a temporary utility bridge would be constructed over 12th Avenue / Route 9A. And just to be clear, the walkway and bikeway would remain in operation throughout the entire project. With that, I'll pass back to Sam.
Thanks. So Section 4F requires consideration of historic resources, and simultaneously, Section 106 also requires review of a project's effects on these same resources. So with that, the New York State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, reviewed 2 items. The first was the remnants of former Piers 68 and 69, which SHPO determined to not be eligible for listing in the National Register. And the second was the historic Hudson River bulkhead, which we briefly touched on earlier. SHPO determined that the project changes Jake just described would have no additional adverse effects to the bulkhead beyond those which were disclosed previously in the final EIS. So all of this taken into account, we are anticipating that the project modifications would warrant a Section 4F de minimis impact determination. So what is that? A de minimis impact determination means that a project will not adversely affect the activities, features, or attributes of park properties, and that there would be no adverse effect to historic properties, which, like I just noted, SHPO concurred with. A de minimis impact determination doesn't require analyses to determine potential avoidance alternatives, though we're still considering how to minimize effects to the extent possible. To reiterate, and I know there are a lot of words on this slide, but essentially the project changes that we've discussed would meet de minimis conditions, as they're not going to prevent reasonable access to the river, substantially impair the recreational features of the boathouse, or result in significant adverse effects to the Hudson River Park's estuarine sanctuary. The park's walkway and the adjacent bikeway would be maintained, and the area that the project changes would affect would be just a small part of a very large waterfront park. And again, based on SHPO consultation, there would be no additional adverse effect to the bulkhead. So passing it back over to Jake.
Thanks. So yeah, I'll briefly describe what construction in the park is actually going to look like with some of these safety measures and best management practices in place. So yeah, obstruction removal activities in the Hudson River. These are going to occur simultaneously with ground stabilization and cofferdam work that was already considered in the EIS. And that's going to be located west of the pier headline as shown in the following slides. So here you can see the conceptual staging plan for obstruction removal as well as the concurrent ground stabilization work within the cofferdam. And this is during the first season of work beginning in July of 2025. So in green, you see the pile removal area associated with the former Pier 68, and the ground stabilization cofferdam is in the white rectangle. The brown areas around these 2 work zones indicate areas restricted to boaters, and the blue lines represent or indicate representative paths of travel for boaters out of the nearby Pier 66 boat moorings. So boaters traveling southbound would be unobstructed. However, boaters traveling northbound along the pier headline would have to travel west into the 45-foot navigation channel around the cofferdam and then back over to the pier headline to continue north. And this construction plan and representative paths of travel were developed in collaboration with HRPT and the boating organizations that are operating here. And it was actually preferable for the boaters to travel entirely around the cofferdam work, as it may have been unsafe for boaters to try and navigate in and around these restricted areas closer to the Manhattan shoreline. So you can see as construction progresses in season 1, the cofferdam work will move closer to the Manhattan shoreline further east, eventually comprising just sort of one restricted area for both the obstruction removal activities and the cofferdam work. And again, you can see boaters would be traveling west around the cofferdam and in order to go north along the pier headline, but would maintain unobstructed access to the pier headline traveling south. And then here we have just season 2 of work where obstruction removal moves to the former Pier 69. And this is starting July of 2026. And you can see, again, boaters will be traveling around the cofferdam. However, the cofferdam continues to move closer and closer to the Manhattan shoreline. So during obstruction removal activity, work zones are going to be sectioned off with these marker buoys, as you can see on the screen. And these are going to be equipped with solar lighting so that they're visible at all hours of the day. And lighting would also be used on the barges that are going to be in water for obstruction removal. Turbidity curtains, as you can see here, and some other best management practices would also be implemented to minimize turbidity and sedimentation within the Hudson River during this obstruction removal work. And then as for land side, as previously mentioned, there are a number of safety and security measures that are proposed. As I mentioned before, there's flaggers and pedestrian managers that would be stationed at all of the construction staging area access points, as well as physical barriers such as delineators, concrete blocks, and bollards to separate pedestrian and bike traffic and filter them out from cars and separate them from themselves. Construction fencing, again, would be clad with fence wrapping with graphic designs designed in consultation with HRPT or Hudson River Park Trust, and would restrict access to work zones. So again, just bringing this all to a sort of high level, we've proposed safety and security measures to protect boaters, pedestrians, and cyclists during construction. And following the completion of construction in the Hudson River Park, the area being used will be fully restored. So GDC is committed to continuing to work closely with the Hudson River Park Trust, the boating community, and the public throughout this process.
So like that slide just showed, the project team will continue to maintain coordination to minimize disruption at the park, and will also continue to communicate with regulating agencies and all affected parties. We'll also be sending regular boater safety alerts in coordination with the Coast Guard so that boaters are well aware of ongoing construction activities, plus a public information center staffed by a community coordinator will be opening next year in Manhattan. So we'll be available on the ground to provide project-related education and get the community's feedback. This presentation is currently available online at hudsontunnelproject.com, along with instructions to provide comments by emailing Christopher Hansen at the FTA. We welcome your Section 4F related comments. The comment period extends through the next month or so until July 15th. So with that, thank you. I'll turn it back over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Leslie. That's the end of our presentation.
Thank you, guys. We'll go to some of our committee questions. I do want to mention a few things. So we are, this letter or these comments, obviously from Manhattan Community Board 4 are due, as they said, next month. And transportation is probably going to have a big bulk of this as well. So we're going to do it in conjunction with the Transportation Committee. Christine, Janine, can you bring Christine over if she's not still?
I'm still there.
Okay, good. So we in conjunction with the Transportation Committee. And before we get to questions, I also talked to a few times about this with Hudson River Park Trust. So they are in constant communication with Gateway. So everything, the piles, all that stuff is going with coordination with Hudson River Park Trust as well. So I mean, they said that the amount of meetings and talks they've had have been numerous on how to go about this. So I just wanted to put that out there. Obviously, they're involved in this in every way, shape, and form as well. So I just want to, Rebecca, if you could put it to our committee, that would be great.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna go this way this time. David and Katie.
Hi, I have a series of questions. Sorry if I missed this, but is this related to a rerouting of the tunnel path?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. A rerouting of the what?
Tunnel path?
No.
I'm sorry. Could the is it possible to take down the presentation so I could see faces? The current tunnel path is not going to be rerouted. If I'm understanding your question correctly.
Right, okay, thank you.
Rebecca, just explain, I'm sorry, Rebecca, if you could explain a little bit about the tunnels and the patent exactly. Well, I know you said that there's repairs, obviously, but just the total capacity.
What the project is doing is doing two things. It's building 2 new tunnels, and then it's going to be rehabbing the existing tunnels.
Right, I've got all that. Do you have a plan that shows how it will approach Penn Station, at Penn Station?
Yes, and Drew, I don't know if you want to, if Drew or Tolga want to speak to that a little bit more, that a little bit more expertise on that. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. There was a slide that was presented earlier in this deck that showed sort of a plan view of the entire project. And there's an inset at the bottom left-hand corner that was shown. Basically, the way the tunnel alignment comes into Manhattan to where you saw it at 12th Avenue and around block 675, lot 1 between 30th and 29th Street. The tunnel alignment then runs through the Hudson Yards. So on the West Rail Yard, there's a project that's run by Amtrak in terms of completing the remainder of the tunnel in Manhattan from 30th Street to 11th Avenue. Then between and actually, if you go to the next slide, I think it was the contract package slides that shows a little bit more. Perfect, right there. Perfect. Thank you. So that the inset is what I'm talking to, the bottom left corner. So that's the tunnel alignment in Manhattan from the Hudson River at the left into Penn Station on the right, which is just east of 10th Avenue. So the yellow that's shown there between 11th Avenue and 30th Street is the work that's being constructed now in the Hudson Yards on the West Rail Yard. Everything in green between the west side of 11th Avenue and the west side of 10th Avenue has already been constructed by Amtrak when the Eastern Rail Yard construction with the high-rise buildings there that related companies was constructing. At the same time, Amtrak had the forethought to construct this stretch of tunnel such that there wouldn't be any interference to the businesses once they're built. So that's the actual tunnel alignment in Manhattan, and then you could see it will cross 10th Avenue and then make its way into Penn Station just east of 10th Avenue.
Right, would this work with either a through running or a non-through running option?
Under the Gateway program and the Hudson Tunnel project, the scope of that project is new tunnels from County Road where the green starts into Penn Station and stops at that point. My understanding that there are other projects not called the Hudson Tunnel project that would be looking at those type of options for future Eastern extension, I believe you're referring to.
Okay,
Yes, that's, yes. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we are legislated to just do the Hudson Tunnel project, the projects that you see on this. There's other projects in the future that would require additional legislation, but one of our partners is Amtrak, and we work closely with them on all aspects of everything that's going to be related to the Hudson Tunnel project, and we're happy to take that question back to them if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. If we could just zoom in on another area, do you have a closer floor plan that shows the rerouting of the pedestrian and bike path? Okay, that's kind of in the blue there. All right, and how long will that be in effect?
3 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
And
You're
remember,
welcome.
just to, my memory serves me right, that I think that pedestrian and bike path was initially going to be on the east side, right? And then after consultation was moved to where it is now.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yep, thank you.
Katie, before Katie goes to the question, Janine, Robert Atterbury from Hudson River Park Trust is on. So if you can put him over, just in case anyone has any questions as far as, you know, in consultation with the Hudson River Park. Just
Okay,
FYI.
yeah, I brought him over.
You do, okay, thanks. Katie, go ahead, and then we'll.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. As someone who grew up in New Jersey and still frequently uses Penn Station and New Jersey Transit, I'm very excited to have functioning tunnels. Frequently on the weekends, we get stuck outside of Secaucus waiting for other trains to come out. I want everyone to be aware that essentially you have trains going both directions on one tunnel. And that's 450 trains a day. that are using one singular tunnel. So this is huge and will make a very big difference. My question is something completely different. You mentioned about the voting, rerouting and advisories for the different, voting organizations, and you seem to be focused most specifically on those centered at Pier 66. I'm sure Hudson River Park will also reach out to the other voting, organizations. At Pier 84, you have Manhattan Kayak, and at Pier 96, you have New York Outrigger and Manhattan Community Boathouse. While they aren't in this zone, voters from those organizations do travel south. And I think it would be good for them to also hear directly from you about these impacts, as well as Downtown Boathouse at Pier 26. They travel north. So just making sure there is a lot of recreational boating along the Hudson River. And that information needs to maybe be spread a little bit more proactively than just the Coast Guard.
So Robert, I don't know, I just want to say that HRPT asked us to attend their yearly boater advisory meeting in April. And all of the organizations that you just flagged, I believe, were on that call. And just because you mentioned that, I think you said you were from New Jersey or so go to New Jersey a lot. We're also doing a similar outreach to the New Jersey side of the river as well, to make sure that all the boating community knows about this as well. But we're happy to engage with any organization along the park to let them know, because the more they know about what our footprint is going to be in the water, the safer it is for everybody. But I believe we have done, they have been briefed, everyone that you mentioned.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Raul and Roberta.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's very encouraging to learn that you guys are working on this, especially after learning that there are 450 trains that cross the river. I mean,
Going two ways.
the math works out to like 19 trains an hour in a 24-hour period. That's incredible.
And they don't run 24 hours.
So that's really troubling. What's even more troubling is that you said that the need for repairs is urgent. So definitely, I very supportive of your work. Now, I do have some questions on slides 24, 23, and 22, if I may. That was presented mostly by Jake. On slide 24, which is the one that showed that the walkway in the back and the bikeway will not be impacted. I noticed that your construction staging area, or that construction staging area is, I believe, currently totally empty. Is this a lot that you guys own, or are you leasing it from somebody? How does that work?
The construction staging area shown here is primarily the southern portion of the West 30th Street heliport. So I briefly mentioned two of the heliports at this helipads at this heliport are going to be temporarily impacted due to this construction staging area. So these are under the jurisdiction of Hudson River Park Trust.
I mean, east of 12th Avenue, the where the main shaft is or will be.
Oh,
area,
that's block 6 across. You're talking about across 12th Avenue?
Yes, correct.
Block 675. That's owned by Amtrak.
Okay, so you will have
Yes.
you will have unimpeded access to that lot,
Yes.
even if the project is delayed, takes longer than 2 years.
Yes, that project, yes, we will have access to that. We work closely with Amtrak on that.
So pursuant to that, what about those two helipads on the other side? What happens? What have you negotiated with Air Pegasus in terms of if the project is delayed and takes longer than 3 years? How will that impact the project if you don't have access to? How are you going to handle that aspect of it?
if the project is delayed and the impacts to the helipads is longer than the 3 years than we are anticipating right now, how will we handle that?
Yes, what's the
Okay.
plan?
So-
I mean, what have you negotiated with Air Pegasus?
You know, we will work closely with HRPT if we think there's going to be a delay in the schedule. Since HRPT is this is their jurisdiction, we will work closely with HRPT and Air Pegasus to make sure that we're communicating as early as we know that information and that we're planning accordingly for it. Right now, I mean, you know, construction's a very dynamic, is a very dynamic process in any place, but particularly dynamic in a space as constrained as this and a city as dynamic as New York City. You know, right now we're anticipating 3 years, and we're not anticipating that to take longer. But if we do reach that point, we will engage with HRPT and with all of you to make sure that we're communicating what the plan would be.
Great. And last questions on slide 22, you talked about there being a requirement for seasonal work restrictions, I believe you called it. Yeah, there. What is that? Seasonal work restrictions that you can only work 6 months out of the year?
I believe that's set forth by the Army Corps of Engineers and DEC, and I just want to defer to anyone else on my team who would want to say more about that, but that's my understanding of that. Those are pretty limited permits that we get from them.
Yeah, I mean, most of it has to do with sturgeon, certain fish aquatic life that the two agencies that Rebecca just mentioned, so that we're not disturbing the so-called river bottom during those particular seasons. So that is set forth by the New York State DEC and Army Corps, as Rebecca had stated. Yes. So those are requirements in the contractual documents that the contractor has to abide by in terms of doing work in the river, disturbing that ground. Now, there's certain things that are walled off, so to speak. Jake was talking about this cofferdam sort of west of the pier head line. So the idea is that, you know, in terms of that particular part of the project, as long as the cofferdam is constructed, the contractor could work inside that cofferdam, protected by the cofferdam over the entire year. But to remove pieces of that cofferdam or install pieces of that cofferdam could not happen outside the seasonal restrictions.
Thank you for the
It's when fish are migrating.
Yes.
Roberta and then Jen.
I wanted to ask if the EIS detailed any noise impacts from construction to park goers, and if you could provide more information about any potential noise impacts of this construction.
Mary Ann, do you think you could speak to that a little bit? So there are prescriptions within the EIS, and I don't have them at my fingertips right now, but I'm happy to follow up with that information.
That would be helpful. And then one question that I have is.
But Roberta, I'm sorry, may I just follow up on the noise question just real quick? How noisy is it to remove the piles?
To remove I'm sorry, to remove the piles?
Like the water, how noisy is that? Could it be heard? Like, I mean, I have no idea. I'm just curious.
There will be noise generated. I mean, obviously, to talk about the type of noise is sort of subjective here, but, you know, getting the sort of the decibel levels of what that might be, we could provide that information on the side as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, apologies. I wasn't understanding that you were talking about inside the waterwork. Apologies.
I think that there are two separate questions. So yes, it's about the piles, but it's also about any ongoing construction work. Obviously beneficial if we lose the helicopter noise, but would be curious about any other impacts there. My other question was just if there are concerns relating to anything safety, it could be noise or other, like, I guess, livability or safety concerns. Is there a place where those concerns, like, from community members ought to be addressed?
So, as we said we're gonna have an active community center that's gonna be based in the neighborhood. We have a dedicated community coordinator who is assigned to this project. But in addition, before the Manhattan Tunnels projects go live, which is what this work is related to, we will share with you and all the elected officials and the community board and anyone who needs it will have a dedicated phone number and email address so people can easily access this with any issues.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this project. I understand how important it is, and thanks for answering the question.
Thanks so much, Roberta. I appreciate you saying that.
Jennifer and Jennifer and then Matt, go ahead.
Hi, my question was along the same lines as Roberta's with the noise. I just wanted to ask about, it looks like the obstruction will be removed or construction will be ongoing until 11 p.m. each night, which seems later than most normal construction when it's on the streets. And is it different because it's in the water? And then also going along with the noise, just wondering, I know you said you're not sure yet, but if you knew what we could expect for the neighborhood and then also for people using the park in the evenings.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of your question? That cut out for a second for me.
It seems that the 11 p.m. is later than most construction is allowed to happen.
These are the hours that are set forth in the FEIS that went through that process. I'm not sure of other construction hours within, construction within the area or the neighborhood or throughout the city. But this is what was prescribed in the FEIS.
Anything else? Matt?
And apologies, our noise expert is having a little bit of audio issues, but I will follow up very soon with more information on the noise.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, if you want to speak, I'm sorry, Ben Engel's on this call. Ben, if you want to speak to any of that, maybe that would be more helpful then.
Sure.
Thank you.
So noise generally was studied in the EIS, in particular in the New York construction area. The noise limit was tied to the New York City Noise Control Code, which has a decibel level for adjacent residential properties. Understanding that since the EIS was completed, the EIS assumed that residential mixed-use properties would be built, especially on Block 675, Lot 1, as we're all aware of the new residential properties that were built on the east side of the block, facing 11th Avenue, between 30th and 29th Street. So the EIS did assume that those residents would be there, and the EIS includes the provision of noise barriers, in some cases 15 feet high, to reduce the level of noise, provide that mitigation, and in the cases where blasting would occur, and that would not go to 11 p.m. That would be pretty terrible. The blasting, per the record of decision, would only occur between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. Except under special circumstances, and only with permission from FDNY, and providing a schedule for that blasting to folks in the neighborhood, including CB4 and respective committees. The EIS did assume that those residents would be there, especially on Block 675, Lot 1, as we're all aware of the new residential properties that was built on the east side of the block, facing 11th Avenue, between 30th and 29th Street. So the EIS and any piles that need to be installed, so they're not pier piles, but for the tunnel alignment for the shaft, the outline of the shaft, and in 30th Street if necessary, would be through drilled piles rather than driven piles, which would also reduce the noise levels. So those are some items in terms of construction. Rebecca mentioned the community office, the 24-hour hotline, the email address, and making sure that we are reducing the noise to make sure that we're not exceeding the noise limit.
And Ben, if I could just add on top of that, in terms of the blasting, even though the FEAS, had provisions for that, there's no blasting required or provided in the contractual documents for the Manhattan package that you've seen here in front of you. So, yeah.
We're not at that level yet, right? That's not this phase.
Well, luckily the alignment is high enough that the rock that would normally need to be controlled blasting is not required in this location. So that's a good thing.
Given that this is generally historic fill, this group knows.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. Matt, go ahead.
Hey, Rebecca McRae, good to see you on this project. I have two questions. Hey, the first is on block 675 in the staging area. So for a very, very long time, this board has worked to move the EMS station to 23rd Street to West 29th Street. The last I heard was that construction area was modified to accommodate that new EMS station. And I just wanted to make sure what I heard was accurate, and that's still part of the plan that's being presented to us tonight. And you all are aware of that EMS.
Absolutely. That is not going to impact that.
Oh, that's great to hear.
No, we've worked through different construction staging, so to make sure that could go forward for the community.
Excellent, thank you. And then my second question was about, so hopefully in 3 years, we won't have to deal with a helicopter noise because the Hudson River Act is being modified, and hopefully that will preclude any of that activity in the park. So when we talk about fully restoring the park after this work, I just want to keep in mind, like, hopefully we won't have to fully restore the helipad, and we should think about, like, what are we using that space for? And so it's great that Robert's on, but I just want to make sure we're fully restoring it to what the new uses could potentially be in 3-4 years' time.
And I hear you, and I know those are much bigger and broader conversations than us, but we've definitely heard that before. Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you.
I'm in next month, coming to this committee. We will be bringing the design team for the 29th Street to 46th Street section of the park. So we'll be bringing to introduce a new design team where we'll be looking at all of this, and I'm certain we will have this conversation in greater depth.
Thanks, Robert.
Robert, since you're on, do you have any comments about this that you think that you wanted to add as far as Hudson River Park Trust?
No, we appreciate it all. Obviously, a really important project coming through the park, and we're happy to try to be helpful. In obviously, Rebecca and her team very available for any questions for you guys on the construction pieces. Certainly, our team will, as well as I think some of the most frequent users of the bikeway going up and down, transiting through the park also. So we look forward to it. And Katie, to your question, yes, we had asked the Gateway team. They came to our annual water safety meeting with all water users in the park, and to present and get some feedback on these things. Obviously, working most closely with Pier 66 as they are immediately adjacent. And then the Coast Guard has also spoken about the in-water impacts at this as part of the New York, New Jersey Shared Harbor Education Subcommittee Shared Harbor Day. So they actually reached a much broader segment of boaters, not just in Hudson River Park, but across the whole region, with the hopes to try to spread that word for the folks who do take those longer journeys.
Thanks, Robert. Alice?
Hi, I'm confident that there was an environmental impact report conducted. Can you tell me where I can find a copy of it?
Sure, and we can share. It's at the Hudson Tunnel Project website, and I'm happy to send along that website. If you want to ask another question while I get it.
Oh, I have the website. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, would you, Rebecca, would you pick up where we left off in the first conversation?
Sure.
Trucking versus barging.
So the FEIS studied the removal of the 12th Avenue shaft spoils and the temporary shaft spoils by truck. The majority of the spoils being created in Manhattan will come from the 12th Avenue shaft. If a barge were considered for spoil removal, the spoils would need to be transported across 12th Avenue and loaded onto a barge. Could potentially require additional construction staging space in this park, which, as you can tell, is already limited. That's where we are when it comes to barging right now. So I kind of would like to hear more of what you want to say. I think it's just very challenging in terms of what we would have to get over 12th Avenue and then into the water with the space that is there with the construction that we're already anticipating.
No, that's not something that I could possibly do. It's just that it seemed to me and to others that trucking through the tunnel of all that debris, especially since even the mayor's office is talking about barging versus trucking, is something that I was hoping that your project would consider. I understand that barging would require rethinking a number of things that you have laid out. But from the point of view of having vehicles move through the community, barging is certainly preferable.
Understood. And I just want to say that we're going to have for the trucking that the contractor will be required to follow it, dust mitigation and making sure that they are transporting materials as safely as possible to make sure that the impact of whatever is being removed is minimal. But understood, and we hear you, and we're happy to keep talking with you about that. And if you want to have an additional meeting on that, we're happy to do that too.
Rebecca, you mind if I jump in and add something?
Absolutely. Sure, Drew. Thank you.
Yeah. So one thing that was looked at in the preliminary engineer to mitigate some of the concerns of trucking in Manhattan was the sequence of operations in terms of the tunnel boring machines, the machines that make their way underneath the river to bore the tunnels, to construct the tunnels, to excavate the material from the New Jersey side to the Manhattan side. Interestingly, in those conversations, in the preliminary engineering, there was some concepts put forth of starting the tunnel boring machines from the Manhattan side, located in the 12th Avenue shaft, to make their way westward underneath the Hudson River, cross the state line into New Jersey, where they would be extracted. If that was the case, all of the tunnel muck under the river, and obviously about approximately half of that would be on the New York state line, would be pulled backward through the machine and into the 12th Avenue shaft, where all of that muck would come out of the 12th Avenue shaft on lot 1, and then would need to be removed by trucks. So one of the mitigation, one of the things that we looked at back in preliminary engineering for mitigation of that was to switch the sequence in which the tunnel boring machines would come from the New Jersey side, enter into the 12th Avenue shaft, and the spoils of the Hudson River in that area would go backward, or it is going backward under the river and pulled out at a site on Tunnelly Avenue, which is in North Bergen, New Jersey. So just want to mention, some of the mitigation of trying to keep as many trucks off the road in Manhattan as possible. That was one of the things that we had looked at early on.
That's good to hear. It makes a lot of sense.
Christine, do you have any, I know, so they're also gonna present obviously a transportation, we're gonna coordinate with them, like I said, for a letter. I don't know if Christine had any comments here, just to kind of connect.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a suggestion you had, Leslie, which was that bridge.
If it's about yeah, well, I was gonna get to, so I think we're gonna do that. I don't know if we can connect it and do it in this letter, maybe we could talk about it at exec. But, Rebecca, we have a lot of capital projects in our area. And the one thing that we're not seeing yet out of this one is a community benefit. I mean, can you remind me, how many billions of dollars is this?
$16 billion project.
16 billion? So.
16, yeah.
Yeah, 16. So, I mean, obviously with that much money, and with the community going through these hardships, and it's gonna be a long time. I mean, we'll be definitely in consultation with our elected officials and the people who connect with the gateway with them. But we do fully expect that there's gonna be, our area is gonna be left better than when it was first entered into. There's gonna be some sort of community benefit, community pot, community something that we get out of that 16 billion. That's gonna, leave us not just with the wonderful tunnels, I get that, but something maybe beneficial to us in the park or in that area, that will be there for a long time.
Happy to engage with you.
Okay, that would be great. And the other thing, very little, we talked about this also. We actually have the co-chair of our arts committee here. We can consult with you on a nice big, that's gonna be an ugly area for a very long time. So hopefully we can consult with you on, something that could make it pretty with some local artists or sculpture or something that won't impede work, but that it could, be not necessarily a total eyesore.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned in here that the fencing around the on the water side going towards there, that the contractor is required to, and Sam, I think I have that right, and if others can confirm that we don't want that fencing to look horrific. So understood that, the impact, and if it can look nice, let's try and make it look nice. Understood. I mean,
Thanks
as
for
you
that.
saw across the street at block 675, that's with that fencing, the wrap that went around there, that was done with Arted Amtrak, which, hopefully makes that space look a little bit better.
Great, we'll definitely be in contact. Christine, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I think I was going to talk about, you are building, I'm interested into that bridge you are building, and how does it work, and how sustainable it is, and whether this is something you could leave behind and upgrade to be of use for the community, right?
Christine, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. You're talking about the bridge, which the example is on the screen. And if we go back a slide and look on the plan for a second here,
right,
the temporary utility bridge, Christine.
Right.
Okay. So a couple things. The reason that was put into place was to assist the construction activities on the western side of the 12th Avenue, shown here in the salmon pink color. So the whole concept of that is, once the project is out of the way of the heliport in the sort of the pink shaded color, then the park goes back to where it was, and the temporary utility bridge is only utilized by the contractor. So the contractor will not have that site anymore. Therefore, they would not need a temporary utility bridge to service east and west. Because you could tell, Christine, there that the west side of the bridge lands right on where the current bike path and pedestrian path are. Of course, during construction, they won't be there. They'll be rerouted, shown in blue and green. But then once the project is vacated this site after 3 years, as Rebecca stated, then the walkway and the bike path go back to its existing location, and that will be right in the location where the temporary utility bridge touches down in the park.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you. Then we're done with the questions. Anything else? Gateway, thank you. I guess you'll be expecting our comments before the deadline. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the debrief as well. We appreciate
Thank you for all the time that you've given us in the past week, and I'm sure we're going to spend a lot more time together in the coming years. And just want to thank everyone who's involved in this, that we take your comments and your point of view very seriously. And we thank you very much for inviting us to brief you tonight.
Yeah, thank you. It's gonna be a very, very long project with a lot of work, a lot of moving parts. But hope it will all be better for it, hopefully, in the end.
No, the region will be better. So it's a huge benefit.
Yes.
Sorry.
Are trains going through that tunnel in 3 years?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Are trains going through that tunnel in 3 years?
Go.
Oh, no, the expected completion is 2035 for the new tunnels, and the rehab is 2038.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's wild to think about that, I'll be in my 60s, but whatever, we'll all get there, we'll work it out. We will work it out. The first time I talked to Christine last year was like on the cusp of my 50th birthday, and she goes, "It's all ahead of you," which that's what it's all ahead of us.
Yeah.
So
Rebecca, you know what we could do after we celebrate that? We'll walk over to the new Port Authority.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you guys.
So thank you so much. And I just want to thank everyone for their very supportive comments. We appreciate that.
Yeah, the engagement is wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's the committee. We will, like I said, we're not going to write a letter specifically, but we're just going to kind of form our thoughts with transportation, which we could talk about after our last presentation, just in case I didn't miss any notes, we can definitely put that. But we are ready, Janine, I think we're ready for our last presentation. Sorry? Oh. Please, are there, sorry, Rebecca, hold on. Is there anyone who has their hand raised in the public?
There's no hands up. You're good to continue.
Okay. I need someone to tell them. Thank you.
Leslie, can I just ask quickly? I just want to make sure I'm being respectful. Are we, now that you know that, are we okay to exit the meeting? Or do you need us to stay on? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So now this is a presentation by the NYC E-Vehicle Safety Alliance. This is specific to e-vehicles, e-bikes in parks. The New York City did a pilot program on certain parks, none in our district with a pilot program, but have e-vehicles, when I say e-vehicles, e-scooters, e-bikes be allowed in parks. And now they're opening that up to certain parks and greenways, and then they want to kind of open it up to all parks. So this is a presentation. We have Christine, who is another, we're glad they're with us again, because this is another kind of joint effort with transportation as well. So Janet, can you hear me?
Yes, can you see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. You guys are ready to go.
I'm ready to go. Thank you for having me. On behalf of New York City E-Vehicle Safety Alliance, really appreciate it. We've been asked to do a presentation, and we're here to do that. A little bit about us. We started on, well, we're a grassroots organization of over 850 members, and that includes 81 pedestrian and cyclist victims of e-vehicle and moped violence. And we're calling for accountability and advocating for safety for all by requiring registration license plates for all e-vehicles, as well as full-scale micromobility safety. And this includes prohibiting e-vehicles from all, and it got cut off, parks. So today we're here to talk about that. We started on the West Side in early 2023 when I read an article about Pamela Manesse being paralyzed. You can see her photo here when she was knocked unconscious by an e-vehicle on the Upper West Side. Paralyzed on the right side of her body. I like her to tell the story. She's our co-founder, but I will say that she was paralyzed on the right side of her body and lost her livelihood as a cellist.
I'm sorry, I don't think we're seeing the slides if they're changing.
Oh, okay.
We see the
I apologize. Next slide. Go to the next slide. Sorry. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. There she is. Sorry, my apology. So I had read about Lisa Baines being killed on the Upper West Side by an e-vehicle a year or so before that, and then noticed everything that was going on in the streets. And I think we've all seen it and said, we've got to do something. So I reached out to Pam, and the two of us started this group in January of 2023. So here we are now, 850 members later, and unfortunately 80 victims later on top of Pam, and growing all the time. Pam and I started it in hopes that there would never be another death or major paralyzation or serious injury again, but it's happened again and again and again and again. And I know we don't have all night. So in our wish to prohibit e-vehicles from parks, I'll be discussing tonight how much more serious the e-bike issue is than is on the record due to the inaccurate DOT e-vehicle crash stats with injuries and the misinformation about how dangerous e-bikes are. And this includes how dangerous pedal assist e-bikes are. That includes city bikes. There's a lot of misinformation around there. Our newest victim, who I spoke to today, is Marilyn Lewin, 77. She lived on West 66th Street. In April, she was hit from behind by an e-bike rider while she was taking her daily walk that she loves so much in Central Park. And he fled, as 98% of the e-bike and moped riders that have hit our 81 victims did. 2 of them stayed, 79 fled. She was knocked unconscious by the e-bike. She was left on the ground with a broken tibia and fibula in multiple places, shattering her bones. She no longer lives on West 66. She now is starting her 3rd month living in a rehab facility on the Upper West Side, and she'll probably never walk again. She told me today that walking in Central Park was her favorite activity, and this is nothing less than heartbreaking. The accident was not reported by the NYPD. She's still trying to get that going, and we're going to talk about reporting in a little bit. But we can't forget our older New Yorkers during this time, this e-vehicle crisis time. Every age is quite vulnerable to being mowed down, but older adults and disabled people in our group do not want to go to the park anymore. They are afraid. This is a quality of life issue if there ever was one. 65 and older is also the fastest growing demographic in New York State, and they're also the group most vulnerable to be seriously injured by an e-vehicle. These are New Yorkers that have worked hard their entire lives, and they should be able to enjoy parks without fear of being hit or actually being hit. Next slide, please. I'm sparing all of you from countless horrific and gruesome photos that I have of our victims. Instead, these are some of the injuries, not all, that are included in our group. All these people and injuries have names attached. 1 death, permanent paralysis, 7 traumatic brain injuries, 5 skull fractures, 47 broken ribs, broken hip with hip replacement, titanium plates in heads, broken legs, ankles, arms, clavicles, hands, knees, shoulders, feet, and fingers, and all have some form of PTSD. The quality of life of New Yorkers has changed forever due to the e-vehicle and moped madness we deal with on our streets. And this is just one group that these victims found us. We don't represent even the majority of victims. That's how scary it is. This is going to continue to happen. We really need to reel this in, and of all places, in our parks. Dr. Daniel Murphy is a member of our group, and he's the chief of emergency medicine at St. Barnabas Hospital. He told us that in reference to e-vehicle injuries, that the quantity of injuries that he sees in his 1 ER, the quantity and the acuity of these injuries continues to grow exponentially all the time, quote unquote. Next slide, please. And thank you. This is beloved teacher Priscilla Loke, who was killed by a pedal assist city bike in Chinatown in September while legally crossing in a crosswalk. Many think that, and this is important in this discussion around parks, because many people think that these pedal assist bikes are somehow not as dangerous as the commercial bikes, the ones that deliveristas or many others ride. Her many loved ones beg to differ. So do many of our seriously injured e-city bike victims. Commercial e-bikes and e-city bikes weigh 2 to 3 times what an average bicycle weighs. They go faster, they brake more slowly. They are not bicycles. They are in the same class, they shouldn't be, but they are not bicycles. People often ride them on autopilot. We've all seen that, looking at their phone, you know, letting it take care of itself because you don't have to think too much when you're on, you know, just flying down the road with a motor. Priscilla was killed by a city bike that was going under the speed limit, which is 20 miles per hour. But city bikes can go much faster than 20 miles per hour. That's one of the misconceptions, especially downhill. And don't hear that from me, because I'm not an expert, but we've got one in our group named John Campo. He's here tonight. Professional cyclist for I don't know how many decades now. Quite a story he has. But he knows very well how fast they can go, and he's a great person to talk to. Please take a look later at his video on our website at nycevsa.org, where he really can get into the details of just how fast and dangerous city bikes are, as well as e-scooters and commercial bikes. Next slide, please. So as I said, they're not bicycles. They're 19 times more dangerous than bicycles per Alex Boris's study, Assemblymember Alex Boris. You can find this study online, and common sense would tell us the same. Again, heavier, faster, brake more slowly. And the pedal assist bike that, as the pedal assist bike that killed Priscilla. So please look for this online to see the details here. But one thing that you can see is that there are more e-bike deaths than there are bicycle deaths. And DOT has some stats that have even more, a different time period, but I think it's 30 versus 23. Out of 30 deaths, 23, excuse me, were e-bikes. 7 of the e-bikers killed here on this stat were killed hitting stationary objects. And that's important. It's just important to mention. It's very sad and important. And as our member of EVSA, Janine, who is here tonight, but just had a baby, so she may have had to go. So it's getting late. Next slide, please. Many of the crashes aren't reported at all. So when you saw the slide that was just up there and it had whatever it was, 2,100, that's not even close to how many accidents there are. And that's one of the things at EVSA that we want everybody to understand, that crashes and injuries, for the most part, do not show up on DOT stats except for deaths. We're not questioning the deaths, okay? And if you look at this chart here, you'll see that of our 81 victims, 5 had proper police reports, 4% showed up on the DOT stats. 11 left without reporting, and that happens. People are traumatized. They may have a broken finger, a broken arm, a broken leg. They hobble home and they don't want to deal ever again. In some of these members' cases with what just happened, or they don't get around to reporting. They don't want to revisit it. They've got PTSD. They maybe didn't have to go to the hospital, or maybe they did, but it didn't get reported. 5 were accurately reported as e-vehicle or moped crashes. They were handwritten in on the form. The police officer wrote it up. And that leaves 65 that tried to report what were told that it couldn't be reported for various reasons. And the reasons are, and pretty much this is in order, and these are our victims. This is something I'm making up here. The rider fled the scene. That's the most common reason that they're not reported by police. If the rider fled the scene, I can't report it. The majority of our victims, more than any other reason, that's what our victims heard. It isn't a crime, was a common one that was heard. You're too late in reporting. Well, in some cases, it's because they were in the hospital for a few days and they came to the precinct afterwards and they say it's too late. Or you left the scene of the crash. Well, yeah, as Janine might tell you tonight, if she's still here, she left in an ambulance. That's why it wasn't reported until a few days later, and they didn't take the report. So, oh, and then there were a couple people that said that the police officer said, "Are you sure it wasn't a kid under 12 that hit you from behind just now?" We have a problem with reporting, and we're working on it through a precinct program where we're going around as EVSA to all the precincts and asking for a mandate that these crashes are reported. Because when you try to get legislation passed or try to talk about how e-bikes don't belong in the park, it's really hard to get people to listen to you when the stats are so wrong. And so please believe us and believe our victims. They are not reported, the crashes with injuries, most of the time. But One other reason that they're not reported is that the DM correctly, when they are reported, is the DMV 103 form. And that is a form that has motor vehicle on it and assault, but it does not have moped, e-vehicle, e-bike. So we worked with legislators like Alex Boris, who wrote this bill, and it just passed in the Assembly and the Senate. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. To change the DMV 103 form, the bill is A7628 in the Assembly and S7610 in the Senate, and the change requires that reporting of accidents to include information indicating whether certain crashes involved electric scooters or bicycles with electric assist. So that has passed. We just need the governor to sign it. And that will help, because when they are reported, they'll be reported accurately. Sometimes they're reported as motor vehicle crashes. And we've met people, I've seen reports, and we've met people where they went under a car because all that was on there was motor vehicle. So we don't want that to happen. We want car accidents to be always counted correctly. And we want e-vehicle, moped, and scooter crashes to always be counted correctly. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So the mission of Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life. And I know that CB4 butts up against it in a sense, because you have sort of the southwest entrance, which is one of the busiest entrance areas for bike, and people are, there's e-bikes being rented there, and electric rickshaws, that are running around there. And it's a very, very, very busy area for this kind of action. It would be safe to say that this mission statement holds true for all parks, that they're a place to escape, a sanctuary, a respite, place for peace. Some of the worst offenders are there in that southwest corner entrance of Central Park when it comes to egregious riding. And we have many a cyclist and pedestrian who can attest to that in our group and elsewhere, and me, because I live very close to it as well. So much speeding through red lights in the parks, so much riding all over pedestrian pathways. It makes it so it is not a pleasant experience. It's not a sanctuary. It's not peaceful. It's not a respite. It is the one place that New Yorkers had left to get away from everything on these streets is our parks, and we can no longer do it. The mayor wants to extend the pilot program to all parks, including the parks in your district. Right now, it doesn't include them. We know that. It does include, of course, Central Park, Prospect Park. We had a meeting with Eric Botcher last week, his office, and we felt that he understood the concerns. He definitely thought we made sense. I mean, it's hard to say it's not going to make sense. So we had a very, very good meeting, and we continue to have meetings with legislators and hope that people can see and understand our point, especially when they meet our victims. I had a crime stat data slide here and opted to take it down because I wasn't sure. Sometimes it's hard to sort of prove that the big uptick in crime in the past year it's doubled right now year to date since the pilot program started. It's doubled. It's 100% higher, and robberies are 250% higher year to date. So can we attribute that to the fact that we're hearing about all these, crimes with mopeds and e-bikes in the park? Well, we reached out to Central Park Precinct Commanding Officer Levino today, and he said, quote unquote, I'll read it, "We have 9 incidents this year so far of grand larceny robbery in which e-bikes were either the method of flight or the property taken." And this is year to date since the pilot program began. E-bikes present challenges to us because they are difficult to capture, to track down, especially in times that the park is crowded. Perpetrators exit the park before victims can even call 911. And a fleeing suspect on an e-bike, which could travel at high speeds compared to pedestrians, also poses a safety risk when the pedestrian pathways are used. So that's why I thought that was important. We did have a way to say, hey, this may very well be related. So we wanted to say that without putting a stat up and saying it is related. We wanted to share that quote with you. Next slide, please. And thank you. So again, we're here tonight to request for a resolution to be written on behalf of EVSA's 81 victims of e-vehicle crashes and 850 members. We ask that you write a resolution prohibiting all e-vehicles from our parks, thus ending the e-bike parks pilot program. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing about our victims. We have more here tonight. We have a few of our victims here tonight that would like to say a few words. And thank you.
Thank you, Janet, for your presentation. Before we go to the people of the public, like you said, and Christine, is Christine over? Yes, I see her. I just want to, if anyone has any questions for Janet or anything, I just want to remind this committee, this is for parks only. A lot of the stats she gave were citywide, or some of the instances were citywide. That's not what our committee is for. Our committee is really just specifically talking about having e-vehicles or moped, or I should say e-scooters, in parks, which the mayor has this pilot program, which is now extended, and they're looking to extend further. I don't know if anyone has any questions or.
Can I just add one thing, Leslie, real quick? I just want to say, you are correct. It was all over the city, but it's very indicative of how dangerous this is, and being that the park is the only place you can escape. And I want to make certain that you know that many of our victims but many of our victims were hit in the park. So, in parks.
Yes, no, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Could just be given an overview of what the pilot program is.
So I have the pilot program, which I think is out of pilot stage right now, was.
It ended May 31st. Yep, May 31st.
And they renewed it.
What?
They renewed it for another year.
Yes, and then he says he wants to extend it to all the parks, right? So was to allow e-vehicles or e-bikes, I should say. When I say e-vehicles, sometimes it gets confused with e-cars. It's not one.
Like the scooters.
Yeah, the scooters, the bikes, allowed in parks, but it was certain parks that he marked. They were, then that pilot program, he wanted to extend to all parks, or to, I guess, gradually expand to all parks.
And it's currently in Central Park.
It's currently in Central Park, it's currently in
Prospect
other
Park.
parks that are not in our district. Central Park, not in our district. The entrance to it, where they have all these e-bikes, is the Columbus Circle area. I think what was concerning, or I talked with Christine about this, was the expansion to all parks. Like Chelsea Park, wherever it is that you could ride your bicycle through or whatever. So does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Well, hi, Janet, it's Sally Greenspan.
Hi, Sally.
Hi there. So our group, outside of this committee, pedestrian and bike safety, has been working on the same issues. So support of request. It is our only sanctuary. We have enough danger on the streets. I'd like to have a place I can go and walk and not worry about being run down by an electric vehicle. Even the regular in the parks are moving very quickly. As usual, with this type of issue, and by the way, that legislation is going to go a long way if the governor signs it.
Can you speak a little louder? I'm sorry.
If the governor signs that legislation, it's going to go a long way towards helping this whole cause, because accidents will be reported. But coming back always full circle is the enforcement, and that's the biggest problem. In a perfect world, people will go into the park or whatever they're riding and follow the rules and not do dangerous things, and then we would be having this conversation. But as we all know, for example, they're not permitted. Electric vehicles, motorcycles, they are not permitted on the Hudson River Park. Yet they're there, they're all over the place. I can't tell you how many close calls I've had there. And if they're allowed, even if we don't allow them in Central Park, how that's going to be enforced is a mystery.
Or any park, not just
any park, is a mystery. It's just a mystery. But to go out and blatantly expand this pilot program and then maybe, just make it permanent would be terrible. I don't see the point. The people is my understanding that the people on electric bikes, whether they're delivery Easters or whether people going to work, are trying to make time, better time, by using an assisted bicycle. We should be going to Central Park to be riding pleasantly, not to be speeding through the park as fast as we can. There's people walking dogs, there's children playing. There are old people just trying to take a walk. They do not belong in any park. They don't belong in the Hudson River Park, and they're there. So that's my speech. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sally.
My daughter with my husband, after this was on the schedule, it was last Sunday, not this past Sunday, Sunday before, and she was, with him riding her bike on the green, on Hudson River Park, which we're not talking about, that's a state, that's different. And e-scooter hit her on the bike. She's fine. I mean, she fell off the bike. She, I wasn't there. She was my husband. And he in the e-bike, and he scooted, and he went, and my husband started yelling at him. He said, I'm like, nothing you could do. It's, she's fine. But I'm just saying, I think it happens a lot on these,
And to Janet's example, by the way, we all know, I think it was last week, they got a guy on a moped who had just done a robbery. They shot him. He wounded 2 cops. I don't think he killed a cop, but in capturing him, 2 cops were wounded. He had a gun. He wounded 2 cops, but they shot him too, and they caught him. So that's a good thing. But he was out doing his normal day's work, snatching pocketbooks with his moped.
Yeah. I just want to be very, very careful that we're very specific to parks, and because we are the Parks Committee, and we are, no, I'm not saying you did, I'm just saying we are the Parks Committee, and our mission, I would think, is to protect the parks. And,
That's what we're talking about.
Yes,
I can't
go ahead.
deal with this.
Yeah, Roberta.
I just wanted to clarify, my understanding was that the pilot did not include mopeds or anything beyond pedal assist. So the class A e-bikes that may assist one.
It doesn't. It's pedal assist, and it's stand-up electric scooters. But that's why a lot of I was talking about is how dangerous pedal assist are.
We're saying mopeds though, this conversation, and so
Well, they're in the park now. They're in the park because it's a bit of a free-for-all. So they're in the park, but you are correct. They are not supposed, people call them scooters. We don't call them that. We call them mopeds. So thank you. Yeah, they're all over the park now too, but they are not legally in the park right now. So, yeah.
So I do want to just speak a little bit as somebody who does utilize pedal assist for, particularly to, get up hills and to make it a little bit easier to get from point A to point B. These can be particularly useful. And when I'm thinking about Central Park, I do think, I like to bike up to the museum. It can be helpful to, as you're heading uphill, to really have a little bit of extra juice. And so people are utilizing these not just as means of moving faster, but also as mobility aids. I think as there are instances in which people might otherwise, either drive or utilize more environmentally harmful means of transportation, in order to get from point A to point B, to be able to have kind of a safe place in order to get to those 2 points within our parks, has just personally improved my experience, my ability to get around the city, and I know that it has for other people. That does not diminish the problems that have been caused by individuals who have either broken the law blatantly or who have, utilized their vehicles, whether or not irresponsibly. But I think it would be, a mistake to not understand, one, how beneficial and useful this is to some New Yorkers, and then two, as the Environment Committee, to also understand that there are, environmental benefits to promoting alternative forms of transportation, and that going through our parks can often be one of the safer means for individuals to travel.
So I just have a
Clearly you
question.
haven't been
I have one quick question though. So are you saying that in the park, a city bike's taking the place of a car in the park? I'm just trying to. Because you're saying it's
Honestly,
environmental.
No,
I was just
obviously,
asking.
no, that is not what I am saying. What I am saying is that it is a alternative route. So individuals are taking the park because this city streets, as I think a lot of cyclists and pedestrians as well could tell you, are often blocked by either vehicular traffic deliveries, construction, or other means. And so parks are oftentimes very useful ways to get from point A to point B. Like I said, I don't want to diminish the important work that EVSA is performing here, and I appreciate the comments, but I want to raise this because I don't know how many individuals on this board, particularly in this room, have the experience of riding e-bikes on a regular basis and like to do so responsibly. And so I did want to speak a little bit to that experience and the benefit that it affords New Yorkers who live in this community.
Great, thank you. Raul, and then, yeah. Yes, of course.
So Janet, thank you for your presentation. I share your concern about the dangers that bicycles and mopeds and city bikes present. But I am a little bit conflicted because I personally live 1 block from that southwest entrance of Central Park that you're mentioning, and I use it a lot with a bike. I go biking in the park all the time. So I didn't even realize that there was a pilot program of any kind in Central Park. There are, because I see all kinds of bicycles and mopeds and scooters going up and down the loop, the inner and larger loops. Well, actually, I only use bikes in the park because I consider using them outside of the park too dangerous because of cars. So I walked that 1 block to the southwest. Well, there used to be a city bike rack around there, and they moved it, and I haven't found a new one. But anyways, I used to walk it up there. It was right next to the Trump Hotel. I would rent it there, and then I would go in and I'd go to the park through there. So I'm a little bit conflicted about restricting it because that's where I do my biking. But I also recognize the dangers of inappropriate use of bicycles, mopeds, and scooters on sidewalks, outside of the bike lanes, at crosswalks. So I'm definitely wanting to look for a solution to that. I'm not sure that prohibiting people from using bikes in the park is the solution.
E-bikes.
It's not bikes in the
E-bikes.
park. It's not bikes in the park. You can use bikes all day.
I use a bicycle. But I like the challenge going up those hills.
No, so we're not talking bicycles, we're just talking e-bikes, the motorized,
Well, I understand, my wife uses it.
Oh.
I use the bicycle.
Like you use regular bicycles.
I use a regular
Right,
bicycle, my wife uses the e-bike,
I use a regular bike, yeah.
but she uses it anyway.
Yeah.
So I am conflicted because I would hate to see her not being able to use the e-bike in the park. Again, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the danger is there. I recognize it, I see it, and I certainly am looking to find a solution to that.
David, and then I think Jim.
Yeah, just some observations. You know, I was a regular bike commuter to work for about 15 years, almost every day of the year on my own non-powered bike. I regularly use city bikes, sometimes the pedal assist. I've even tried out the gray ones. And I think the gray ones are an order of magnitude different from the other pedal assist city bikes. They go very fast. Just last week, I was riding with an elderly friend in Hudson River Park who was struck by a rider of one of those gray pedal assist city bikes who lost control. You know, a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't be able to ride a bike or commute on a bike are enabled to by having some degree of pedal assist. I almost think they should just get rid of the gray ones, which are always ridden too fast, even when they overtake you on the Hudson River bike path or a city bike path. You know, there's a sense of risk, and I think there's an enhanced sense of danger from them. And another problem is that a lot of tourists use the city bikes. I mean, I do when I travel to other cities. Would they know that they can't ride one of these bikes in a public park? And another thing, you know, it's always just baffled me why the police department doesn't issue tickets. The ticket for running a red light, and I know this because I got on a regular bike, is $190. You know, we're looking at raising funds from congested pricing, and you don't have to stand at a bike path for very long before you see people, you know, violating all sorts of rules, going the wrong way. You know, riding gas-powered vehicles in the Hudson River Park bike path. I don't know why the police don't simply step in and enforce. That would be part of the solution. So just some thoughts.
Thank you, Jennifer, and then Jennifer, and then Christine. I think Christine has her hand up.
There's a bunch of hands up there.
Yeah, definitely.
Just going along with what's been mentioned several times, it seems like the most important piece of this would be enforcement, that even if we did have a resolution for e-bikes not to be in the park, they likely still would be. Part of why I asked you about the pilot program and where it was located is because I'm in Hudson River Park frequently, and there are bikes just flying through. Even yesterday when I was walking, you know, there's the bike area, and then there's the walkway, and there's the so I feel like the enforcement piece, if we get on that, it might be more effective to get the result that we're looking for. But I'm not sure of the exact mechanism, like if that's a letter or if that's what we would specifically use, but I'm wondering if it would make sense to focus our efforts there so that we
It can be
wouldn't have
both. It can be both.
But wait, enforcement, if they're legal though.
Well, so I mean, I'm guessing if you're using it legally, that you're on a bike path and you're going within the appropriate speed and you're following basic rules, basically like if you're driving a car legally versus if you're doing something illegally and you get a ticket. So it seems that if you're on the sidewalk or if you're just mowing down people and I know that it's really challenging in terms of being able to catch up with someone that's on an e-bike if they hit someone and leave the scene.
Well, they're not allowed to, but they're never gonna do that. The police aren't gonna chase down people. You know, it's too dangerous in a city like this. It's too dangerous to them and to everyone else. Yeah.
They're not allowed.
I don't mean people like bystanders. I mean like enforcement mechanisms.
No, so this is.
That's why we're for license plates, but that's a whole other, you know, that's a whole other conversation.
Janet, hold on a minute. The Hudson River Park is different. It's state, right? State DOT. That greenway, it's different than city. You're not allowed to have e-bikes on there.
Oh, they do.
And they definitely do. And that is it's a big problem. So we talked with Hudson River Park and they said, you know, it's challenging because people then, you know, enforcement chases after them. It makes it quicker, you know, so, you know, what do we do type of thing? And I mean, I don't know if they're about to legalize it. They say no. You know, they understand the risk factors of having what you're saying, the situations that come about. I mean, like I said, my daughter had the same thing. So we're kind of just limiting our, I guess, letter discussion, if there is whatever it is, to the city jurisdiction of parks.
Is it also possible, since I don't know, I don't ride the pedal assist, I'm not familiar with it, but is it possible since they go too fast to do the kind of thing you can do on like a golf cart where you can't go past a certain speed on them? Could they also just bikes that way people wouldn't be able to cause the issue?
I think that's been brought up.
And I believe that they're capped at the Class A like speed limit, which in New York State, I believe is 20 miles per hour. It certainly could be lower, and I understand why that would be valuable.
Right.
We talked about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Christine, you have your hand up, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting discussion. As you know, I'm the co-chair of Transportation Committee.
Yeah.
So the way I look at this is that to me, the park is for recreation and, you know, people not being watching over their back all the time. And then there is transportation, the streets for transportation, etc. So to me, personally, because we have not had a discussion with our committee yet, you know, the park should be a place where you don't have motorized anything, you know, no motorized cars, no motorized mopeds, no motorized anything. And that's a place which should be quiet and you are happy to have your kids running around and not being risky. Although I know some people who bicycle, maybe Raul goes very fast because he's very strong. I'm just kidding, Raul. But, you know, but it's a very different experience when you have to push your pedal to, and to me, that's a sport, that's recreation, right? And the park is not a place that should be for transportation. You shouldn't be using the park, just like we move the cars from Central Park and everybody is so happy about that. And Prospect Park is the same way. And all the other parks should be without cars. So to me, that's the test. The test is if you are in a park and there are no motorized vehicle, then there shouldn't be any motorized vehicle, whether they are bikes or cars. And if you are in a park and there are motorized vehicles, we should all fight for removing the motorized vehicle for the parks, because the parks is there for the children and for everybody, you know, not to rush around and go do whatever it is we are doing. So, you know, this being said, and you know, I think it would be helpful to have the crossing of the parks with protected bike lanes when people want to go from, you know, from Columbus Avenue to the Fifth Avenue, and they want to cross. We need to provide the protected bike lanes on those crossings, which go under, right? Because today it's really not safe. It's very unsafe. And any crossing should be providing a space protecting so that the people can cross and don't have to go around the whole park to go to the other side, right? So that I think that's an important, or maybe if it's not possible in one of the alleys of the park, there is a protected lane where they can cross. I mean, you know, so that it's not unreasonable as far as people having to go around, you know, around Manhattan to go to the other side, right? So that's one. And maybe on Fifth Avenue, we should also ask for a bike lane so that people can go down on the other side, on the east side, and don't have to go in the park. So I think it's a system which is not complete now. I'm definitely in favor of barring the no motorized anything in the parks. Definitely in favor of that. But I also think that if we don't provide some facilities, people are not going to respect that. So we need to, you know, bite the bullet one way or another. And that may not be to everybody's taste, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Christine. I'm gonna, I know we have hands raised in the public. I'm going to limit it to 1 minute. I know you guys, it's usually 2 minutes. It's just that it's late and I think the committee has to talk about 3 letters or 3 possible letters, or maybe not letters with gateway, but 3 issues.
Can they do a minute and a half? We just have a lot of victims that it would be nice to just hear a little bit.
We get it. Like we understand. We really do. I think it's
Okay.
just, it's a matter of maybe philosophy.
Okay.
But let me go, Janine. You know what? I'll let you call out because you could see it. I see the hands raised visually, but I'll let you just kind of bring over whoever is public, and then I'll just chime in for a minute. And I apologize in advance, guys. I am going to be strict with the minute.
Okay, so first up is Carrie Michaels and then Janine Berry.
Hi, should I start now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my
thank
name is
you.
Carrie Michaels. I'm a Core 4 member of NYC EVSA. Christine, thank you for your attention, and thank you to everyone in CB4 for their attention this evening. I am a resident of CB4 and have been for 25 years. I was hit in the park last May 31st before the pilot program was legal and severely injured. It affected my livelihood and has affected my life for well over a year now. Prior to that, I am a cyclist and I was hit on my bicycle. So I am definitely in favor of cycling. I fundraise, I'm a charity organizer, so on my bicycle. The problem is, and Leslie, I'd love to correlate with you on this. The problem with, I know this is about parks and greenways in the state, and Hudson River Park is a state park, but they are, City Bike moved in with their racks, and that's why the proliferation of City Bike and illegal motorized bikes are allowed on the greenways. There's absolutely no monitoring, and the state police I'm on that greenway, that Hudson River Park, every other day. There are absolutely no enforcement. So whatever you've been told about the cops can't get anyone, there's no enforcement there.
Thank you, Karen.
Moving back to the park really is a place of respite. E-bikes do not belong there. Thank you.
Thank you. Who was next? I'm sorry, Janine.
Janine Berry.
Janine, go ahead. Your 1 minute starts now.
Hi, Janine Berry. I was hit by an electric scooter in Riverside Park when I was pedal biking 2 years ago from the West Village to Harlem. The e-scooter rider was going downhill at about 25 to 30 miles per hour and couldn't brake fast enough to avoid crashing into me. She left the scene. I had 5 titanium plates implanted in my head with 2 head surgeries. I was out of work for 6 months. It has definitely impacted my work since then. I'm an attorney, and anyway, the police wouldn't take a report because I was in the hospital and couldn't report it until the 6th day after my accident, which 2 police precincts told me was too late. The 5th day was the requirement. Both precincts also told me that I left the scene of the accident also, even though I left in an ambulance. I have an e-scooter like the one that hit me, and it goes up to 28 to 30 miles per hour downhill, and the brakes are terrible. I don't use it anymore. I was an avid city biker since 2014, using pedal and also electric bikes throughout the city for years. I used to commute from Midtown to Harlem through rush hour traffic on city streets and through the parks. I don't find it enjoyable anymore or safe anymore to bike through the parks or in the bikes in the city at all because of the e-bikers, and especially the fully electric city bikes are the worst offenders because they go so fast. I have a newborn and I don't feel comfortable even walking or taking the stroller through the parks. I would really love your help on this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. I see,
Wendy, then Andrew.
Sure.
Hi.
Wendy, your minute,
Hi.
1 minute starts now.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm also a victim of being hit by a city bike. But according to the New York City Parks release, part of the Manhattan Greenway thing is part of the pilot program, which is in your district too. So they have already started including that. So that's very scary. And I do think, and in Central Park, there is actually one access path by 96th Street where you can cross through the park, but they put a sign up, and I'm not exaggerating, it's this big, so no one even knows it exists. So Christine, thank you so much for bringing that up. It would be awesome if there were ways to cross the park. I'm also a cyclist. I'm scared to death to cycle now, which is very sad, but I still do it because I want to soldier on. But City Bike is a horrible offender. They've raised the price to 20 cents a mile now. So really it's very wealthy people who use City Bike to zoom around the city. Yep. Yeah, it's which is crazy. And also they've stopped, the blue bikes are very hard to find. I also have a City Bike membership. I only want to ride a blue bike. It is very difficult to find a blue bike.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy. We appreciate it. Andrew, you're one, can you hear me, Andrew? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I find it really sad that people wait 3 hours for community input, and somebody that's paralyzed, somebody that has 5 titanium plates inputted into her head has to speed talk. I'm thinking of the point that I had was 2 friends of mine. One is a guy named Jim who's 93 years old, uses a walker, who has enjoyed Central Park his entire life, who's now afraid to get into the core of Central Park because he can't pass safely across the roadway. Second is a friend of mine named Bob. He's 35 years old. He's got a degenerative eye disease. He's blind. He's been legally blind. It's getting worse every day, sadly for him. He uses Central Park as his way to get steps because it does not feel safe on the city streets. And now he no longer feels safe in Central Park. And you have to think about the seniors, the kids, and the people that are disabled, because this is really the people that we're affecting the most with these e-bikes running wild. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I apologize for the shortened time frame. I totally understand. And we're gonna go through committee discussion as well. I'm looking at Janine. I'm sorry. Is it Pam and Andrea?
Yes, hi, my name is Pam Manassi, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak and address the community board. So I was hit by a moped, not in the park, but I am partially paralyzed. I do walk with my dog to the park every day, and I am scared not just for myself and my dog, but I'm scared for children playing, as has been mentioned. Dogs who have a right to be there too, and just people walking, okay? And there are so many dangerous riders. What Andrew said about just crossing into the park, that is the most dangerous part. I have a system now where the dog and I just like, she waits when I wait and she goes when I go, and she's like right with me. But I always want to jump out and say, oh, be careful because, there's e-bikes coming. And then with the tourists and the city bike riders who are riding so recklessly. So I do want to mention one thing before I get cut off. This idea of PTSD. Yes, we have all PTSD, whether we ride or whether we walk. And no matter how we get anywhere. And I also do have a car, and I'm disabled now, so I freaking need a car, okay? Wait, I have one more thing. I have one more thing to say. No, I have to finish. Please let me finish. I have one more sentence. It's more than PTSD. It's more than PTSD. It is reality. It is reality. And I'm done. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea?
Well, you raised your hand.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
I'm here on behalf of my mother, who has used the park for over 65 years. She's 85 years old. And at the height of the pandemic in 2021, she was hit out of the park. She was hit can you hear me? Yeah. She was hit. I think somebody else is,
hold on, John, can you please mute? Yes. John, please put yourself on mute until you're called, but go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrea, start over.
No problem. So my mother was exiting the park, she's in excellent health, and she was hit by an e-bike, lifted up on the ground, hit the ground, and broke her hip. She was on a ventilator for 5 days. It's amazing that she's recovered and able to walk. She now will never be able to ride her own bike again. Yes, at 85, she rode in Central Park, and because of the current situation and what happened to her, she never will again. I think we can all say that it is very, very hard to navigate any of the roads. Crossing Central Park West and crossing the roads within the park now is, and I'm a runner, I walk in the park, and I no longer feel safe running on the road because of the biking situation. So there's many things that have to happen, including addressing the pilot program, but that is one step we could take in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I see John.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Your 1 minute starts now.
Okay, I won't get into my history, but
we don't see you on, John, on your camera.
Pardon me?
We can't see you, but I mean, it doesn't matter, I guess.
Can you see him now?
Can you see me now?
Yeah, it's all gray, but it's okay. Go ahead. We could hear you.
Okay, yeah, I won't go into the history, but I teach bike safety. I've been working with the administrations that go back to the Lindsay administration, when Mayor Lindsay closed the park so that we could have bike races. What we're all talking about here is the law. And it's the human-powered law that's been on the books since 1920, over 100 years. None of this happened until the e-bike came around and the e-vehicle. It was amended for the city bike only. And what happened was that opened up a whole plethora of uniwheels and skateboards, and you name it, is running around on the streets with electric vehicles going 40 miles an hour. And I invite anyone on the panel, anyone in city government to ride with me. I ride every day on the bike path. I was hit last June and broke 3 ribs by an electric scooter that broadsided me. And I had 3 broken ribs, concussion, many lacerations. And he left the scene screaming at me. So the Human Power Law was amended. Law number 40 was amended to
John, I'm sorry, 1 minute is up, but I'm not trying to downplay your injuries or anything. We appreciate you coming to our community board meeting. I do want to get through some of the other people that are in the public that have their hand raised, but thank you very much. Susan, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes.
Your 1 minute starts now. Yes.
Yep. I've lived on Central Park West for over 40 years. I am both a walker and a cyclist. Since pilot program came in, I have been largely unable to use the park because when I do, I can't cross the loop. And I've recently been walking on the pedestrian path, except that city bikes are also on them. And I fell one day because I had 2 approaching me from behind. This is just absolutely egregious. And I am also the head of an organization of members of the Upper West Side, and they are in unison wanting the pilot program to be ended. A lot of the members are older, they're seniors, and some are even elderly. And they cannot use the park any longer. It's just tragic.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you coming. Charlie, if I knew you were coming, you're a VIP. You're a former MCB4 person. Your 1 minute starts now.
Thank you. I'm still a public member on transportation committee, and thank you to this committee for letting me speak. Thank you to the EVSA folks for their stories. Obviously, it's hard to hear a lot of the tragedy, and I empathize with that. I just wanted to speak out on behalf of a different type of e-bike rider, and that's a family e-bike, e-cargo bike. I have an e-cargo bike that fits both of my children. When I had a second child, when I had 1 kid, I had a regular bike with a seat on it. And when I had my second child, I had to get an e-cargo bike so I could make it over the bridges and make it up Harlem Hill and Central Park when going to birthday parties in the park. I walk in Central Park every morning, and increasingly I'm seeing more and more moms and dads on e-cargo bikes with 2 empty seats behind them because they've dropped their kids off at school and they're heading into work or heading back home. So there are a lot of different reasons why people use e-vehicles. I can't stand the mopeds. I can't stand the mopeds on our super sidewalks and our sidewalks and going the wrong way. We obviously have a problem, which the Transportation Committee and Christine have been addressing for, we wrote a big letter on it last year. But I just don't want to throw the babies out with the bathwater here. And there's a lot of reasons why people might want to use a motor and a battery, and getting kids around safely is one of them. And as Christine said, if there were safe bike lanes in the transverses on 5th Avenue and 59th Street, maybe we wouldn't need the park. Thank you, Leslie.
You wear a
Thank
helmet.
you, Shirley. And thank you for coming. Renee, your 1 minute, if you could hear me. John, can you please mute your hold on a minute. John, please mute. Renee, go ahead. Your 1 minute starts now.
I'll be very brief. My name is Renee Baruch, and I was hit on May 21 of 2023. I had multiple injuries. I was in the hospital for 4 days initially, and then again in January to follow up on surgeries for 3 more days. I was a caregiver to my dying partner, whose death I was not present for. And I encounter these bikes in the park all the time. I cannot relax in the street, and I cannot relax in the park because it's impossible. It is simply impossible. Whether it's a cargo bike, problem is that these stupid bikes go up hills much more easily than regular bicycles. And as a result, they're on people's pathways constantly. They cross the park because they can. Nobody stops them, and they do not restrict themselves to bike lanes, roadways, anything. They go wherever they want. And I think parks should not be used for that purpose. They should be used for respite, peace, and quiet, and not transport. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you so much. I think that's it, Janine, right? As far as public members, excuse me, members of the public?
Yeah, I don't see anybody else.
Okay. Janet, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it very much. We have many victims, but I think you could hear from the ones that we had. We really appreciate you listening. Christine, thank you for your words. Leslie, thank you. Everybody, Sally, CB4, Parks Committee, we just really appreciate you having us.
We appreciate you guys coming and your time and waiting through a longer meeting.
Yes, it was long. I don't know how you guys do it. We had one other guy, I guess he didn't raise his hand, Tom, but that's okay. He left.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Why don't we, Janine, if you can mute everyone or just, pop everyone out or whatever you have to do, because just to make sure. Just, I don't mean to say, I don't mean kicker, I mean just.
Unpanelized.
Yeah, unpanelized, that's better. Thank you. Why don't we start with the last one first, only because I have a feeling it's gonna be a little bit, it might be contentious or it might, and the other ones we can kind of go through. So again, this was brought to my attention and then Marty's attention from me, with a specific program in the parks. We're just talking about parks. I just want to remind everyone, I don't want to get wayward on this issue or that issue. It's just very specific in our parks. And when I say our parks, we're looking at Chelsea Park, looking at the bigger parks where now we're going to be bicyclists going through or whatever. And also she's right, a little part of the northern part of the Greenway, which is not Hudson River Park. It's on it's a little bit on the
River
west
Park
side.
South.
What?
River Park South.
Right, yeah, it's a few blocks. I think it's a few blocks. That's in our district anyway. The whole thing goes up, but
It starts at 59.
yeah, and it's like, so it's like with a few. But if there's anyone that wants to lead, I mean, there was some questions, a discussion, but go ahead, Aaron. Go.
Well, after hearing the testimony from the people from the EVSA, I obviously now, I now recognize the more acute dangers of the motorized bicycles. I certainly would be in favor of supporting Christine's idea of banning motorized bicycles, or I think she calls them pedal assist bicycles or e-bikes. And it certainly would give me a good excuse to get my wife on the road so she gets on the bicycle and starts exercising more. So, but not banning bicycles, straight, regular bicycles.
It was never a part of the discussion.
No. I just wanna, I don't mean to, go ahead.
No, so.
Okay. So, just so you know, Christine had to leave. But she just said, just tell what she supports, and she said, let's talk about the next step for the reso, just so you guys know, she's not leaving the conversation, she just had to get off. Josephine, and then, Matt, and then Jen.
Maybe they want to make their comments first, but I was just going to, make a motion to do a letter. Specifically, Christine's comments, followed by Raoul to ban any sort of motorized bikes, vehicles, anything motorized in the parks at all. They just don't belong there, period. For so many reasons, and we can go through all the reasons, but people shouldn't have to look over their backs. I mean, that's just, it's crazy. It's gotten completely out of control.
Is there a second for that? Okay, but I do want Matt, I do want Matt and Ruben. So, we're gonna, I don't wanna, I guess we have to vote on that, but why don't we first?
Discussion.
Yeah, well, but, I'm gonna word it though, so we can kind of navigate that. I wanna, since there was a motion and there was a second, I do wanna kind of talk about what would be let's talk about that. What would be the letter and who would be comfortable? So Matt, I'm gonna defer to you. For your comments right now.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, my comments were, I think this was a good discussion to be having. I'm wondering if it would be helpful. This is being piloting. I don't know anything about this pilot that the Parks Department is doing. Like, are they looking at data? Are they, what's the evaluation of this? How has the last year gone? What safety measures are they gonna be putting in? Like, we talk a lot about infrastructure in the park. Like, are they looking at things to put in bike lanes to help designate certain areas? Like, I feel like we need a more fuller conversation. Like, it was good to hear this, and I definitely sympathize with the people that spoke, and I think something needs to happen. But I think we're seeing one half of the story, and I would appreciate more information about the pilot, where it's going. I don't think it's being extended to Chelsea Park, is my understanding. I think it's gonna remain River Park South, Central Park, on the greenways and the like the greenways and the paths, right, where you can currently cycle. But what's.
So I can answer some of the questions for your.
Yeah, I would like to hear from Parks, though. I think it would be important to have them to come.
So this is not a Parks initiative. This is the mayor's initiative. What Parks thinks about this, I will not, we will not talk about, or I'm not sure. Like what?
It is administered.
Exactly, it's being administered by Parks, but it's the mayor's office initiative, or there.
All of the people.
Yes.
All of the executive agencies are mayoral appointees.
Right, but Roberta, the mayor is not saying we have to have 8-foot fences in parks, that's parks. There's a difference where certain things come from. There is no necessary, I don't think it's a study or anything like that from what I've read. It was piloted, let's just see, and again, it was a big park, Prospect Park, Central Park, the big ones. And then the pilot kind of went forward, and then it was said that it would be extended to greenways, other parks. You're right, is anyone gonna go through McCaffrey, these are little parks, but we're talking about the bigger ones where people do go through with bikes. To extend to all parks, that would be okay to have the e-bikes.
Where did you hear that it was extended to all parks?
That it will be, that's his initiative, that's the mayor said. The pilot is first, and then, I don't know if there's a timeline, as far as where it's gonna go, but it's not like, it's gonna be in the small little, it's gonna be where the bicycles.
I think it's currently where it already is for the last year.
Yeah, I think it's been, I think it was last May, I think.
It was supposed to end in May.
I could be wrong.
Extended it for another year in the existing, my understanding is I think we need more clarity. I think I'm not clear where this pilot is, and it sounds like actually that they are collecting quite a bit of information and surveying.
On what, on how many?
On the previous year, on this.
What's the information, just write it down.
I would like to know. I think we need to have that information, right, before we come out with the resolution banning e-bikes from the greenways. I think we're hearing a good part of what's going on, and it's important, but there's a lot that I think we're missing from this conversation.
What would be, I'm just asking you, what would be the upside? If there's a safety issue, what would be the upside?
Enforcement.
No, the upside of having.
The upside is to understand exactly sort of what this pilot is doing, what kind of data they're collecting. I would like to know the statistics, like we heard a lot of statistics, right?
Mhm.
So is there data that they're collecting to show what they've been looking at over the last year?
I can ask Steve Simon, I can definitely write an email to Steve Simon as well.
Yeah,
What data points, and I can put it in the,
whatever they're collecting, I have no idea.
we know they're collecting is what I'm saying.
That's what he's asking.
Yeah, I think we need to understand sort of what the pilot
I
is
don't
studying,
either.
what they're looking at.
Well, I'm sorry.
From what I've read, it looks like.
Oh, go ahead, if it was.
Yeah.
And then Jennifer, do you mind if we just, okay.
So while I am with Sally, a co-founder of Pedestrians for Bike Safety, I do understand what Matt and Roberta are saying about, you know, we're listening to your community organization and their opinion on a city program. We've not heard from the city on the city program. And I think to fully, and we're even now having discussions amongst ourselves of conflicting ideas of what exactly the city program is. We all have computers in our hands, and I looked it up, and, you know, it sounds like they just extended the length of it to May 31st, 2025. It's only on greenways and drives, so it's in any area. In certain parts.
Right.
So it's not like, you know, someone's gonna go into Hell's Kitchen Park with a bike, and they can
Correct.
drive around in circles.
Nor would they, it's a small. one.
Exactly.
Right.
But it seems like the Parks Department is not really giving out any information, at least not to the press, in regards to the data they're
We
collecting.
read the same article.
But they wanna get more data, so I think, again, not to take away from the presentation we just heard and the victims and the seriousness of e-vehicles or e-bikes and the dangers that they pose to people in parks. I think to do our due diligence, we need to understand a little bit more from the Parks Department exactly what they envision and what data they are collecting and how they're collecting that data and how extending the program will help them. Like, are they extending it because they didn't see the data that they wanted? Are they extending it because they didn't get enough data or they're changing? Like, I think we need to know a little bit more as to why.
So we're assuming that they are collecting data, is that what you're saying? We're assuming
No,
that
I
there
mean-
is data collection?
It
Said.
said that they are.
If there is, okay, what is it?
Yeah.
And if they come back and say they're,
They
that's
don't
on-
have it, they'll
yeah.
say, well, what is your pilot program? Because
Well, yeah,
the
like, a pilot, yeah, exactly. Any pilot program, you would be collecting data, or else what's the point of having a pilot?
Right.
Do we know what the motive was for the program? Was it to get more people on bikes and out of cars? You know,
I think it was just because there's more people on
People on
e-bikes,
e-bikes.
and e-bikes
I
wanna be
can't
able to
think
go in other places.
Yeah,
That's the point, is I think it's pretty obvious, I'm not sure what all this digging is, they want to allow
Yeah.
e-vehicles in the park, I don't
Yeah.
think it's that complicated.
I
It's just
agree.
an e-bike, I mean, it's not, that people are riding them, and they want to allow them to ride in the
Right.
parks.
Right.
My personal opinion is that I don't want them in the parks, I'd like to have a safe sanctuary where we can walk and I'm not threatened by these moving vehicles. I don't even see the point. You want to take a leisurely ride in the park on your pedal bicycle, that's what I want to be able to do. I will not ride in the streets anymore with it, but I'd like to feel I can go to the park and ride my bike and not be threatened by bikes speeding by me. Especially somebody pointed out about going on the uphill, how much faster they are on the uphill, and they cut you off. They cut you off. I mean, that in a perfect world.
Yeah, wait, Jennifer.
An observation that I.
Wait, Jennifer was waiting and then Joseph.
They just want to let them in.
Not really.
It's not.
Go ahead, Jim.
So I've got two different things. The first one is just a question, a clarification on what counts as an e-bike. Does the pedal assist on do the city bikes count as e-bikes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so this would be no
No.
city bikes in the
Right.
park. And then it would just be.
No pedals.
No, pedal assist.
It's electric. You can ride the city bike and walk.
Just the pedals.
Not, you can ride city bikes in the park,
Just not the electric.
not electric bikes, not motorized.
Okay, so this is why I'm asking a clarification.
Yeah.
Are there any, because there was talk about gray bikes and things like that, are there any city bikes that are also electric?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there's two different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Three different types. Clearly, I don't ride these things. Okay, so there's three different types, okay. So some of them, and this, again, I always go back to the enforcement piece, just because like we can make all the rules, but we know that people are riding down the side. I used to get mowed down by the e-bikes when I lived in Brooklyn, like going down the sidewalks, delivering food and whatever else, and so I feel like while I truly sympathize with people whose lives have been altered by this, and I'm glad that we were able to hear from them. I also think that what the other points, like the other side is valid, that like parents are using it to take their kids to school, like there are just all these different uses. But none of that matters if we don't enforce the actual rules of the road. And so my concern is how we do that, and if it's a resolution or if it's, I don't know, we need to, who actually does that? Is it the police department that does it? Because we have a problem, clearly, but we're not even enforcing the rules as they stand. So I don't know that adding a new rule is going to help.
And if we add the new rule, the banning bikes, that has to be enforced also.
Exactly, so I feel like the main thing immediately to help these people that came tonight that are clearly gonna be suffering for a long time based on what's happening to them, is to make sure that we just enforce, because a lot of them, I mean, some of them, I guess, got hit while they were riding a bike, but it just seems that if we stop people from doing things that cause those problems, how do we stop that today? And that seems to be an enforced piece. And then if we decide, after we've heard from both sides, that, yeah, we don't want e-bikes in the park at all, this was a terrible idea, we did the pilot, it showed that we shouldn't do this, then I think that's a discussion for down the road, but I think those are two different things. I think we have an enforcement piece and we have a discussion about
Joseph, and then Roberta. Oh, did you want to, I'm sorry, did you want to? Yes, okay.
I mean, to get some consensus, I certainly understand the need to see the data, if they say they're collecting data, but I can't imagine that, we've heard from people, we see it all the time, people get hit and then the bikers run. Who are the people supposed to report it to? That seems to be, there's such a mystery beyond that. I just can't imagine that they're going to be collecting data from every single person who's been run down or almost hit. That seems impossible to me. But I will say that if we're trying to get to a consensus of the letter, maybe the letter is that we're very concerned about this pilot program because of these certain issues, and we're requesting certain information from data and when is this gonna happen? How is it being collected? And
Yeah,
be very
I agree
specific
with
that, but we need to say that we're very concerned about this.
I see,
that sounds.
I see that we've got two possible letters.
Do you have something, you want to say something, and then Roberta has her hand up?
The two possible letters are the one that we've been talking about, ban the bikes, but the one that we only started to talk about a second ago is the issue of enforcement, and that's the one that's really more serious than anything else. If we're gonna write a letter at all, the letter should say, the enforcement has been horrendous. We've heard horrible stories about people getting hurt. And it's not just in parks, it's all over the place. Seniors crossing the bike lanes throughout the city are having problems, and the rules aren't being enforced. And I don't think any letter we write is gonna change that. I mean, I would like to see it change, and it's worth writing a letter to say we need enforcement in all these spheres, and it should be with transportation. It should be a community board letter that does parks and transportation, but the lack of enforcement is absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, Roberta had her hand up, and then I'll.
So absolutely, agree with the points on enforcement in particular. It's challenging to listen, to some of the testimonies because some of the incidents that have happened are clearly like very illicit activity that's happening in parks and like on the drives. For example, the use of mopeds, going the wrong way or exceeding what is the speed limit or capped for pedal assist or Class A bikes. And I believe, I doubt that there is anyone who does regularly ride an e-bike who believes in doing so in a lawful manner. who wouldn't want to see enforcement against, the people who are making us unsafe. The other thing that I think is important to highlight in enforcement, and what I hope will someday, make this easier. The problem at the end of the day is that pedestrians, cyclists, and e-vehicle riders are competing for the same space. And they're being put into conflict, and as more and more people decide to bike both acoustic and electrically, we've seen these rates of cycling of both types of vehicles go through the roof in the past 4 years. I think it begs a question as to what we can do to separate and to ensure that individuals have, one, more space, and two, more separated space. I think Christine's idea that there would be separate, infrastructure and the transverses certainly makes a great deal of sense. I'm not saying it has to be that, but if there could be, ways to better separate the infrastructure or create infrastructure that promotes safety, that is probably the most effective enforcement that we have seen, in part because it doesn't necessarily require someone to be standing there and handing out tickets. It is a question I want to ask parks specifically from the pilot. They have seen these conflicts of space, and if there are plans, what is the intention for dealing with these conflicts?
Right.
Because I think that they're certainly occurring.
Go ahead, Sam.
So, Katie and I have been on this for a couple of years now, and I want to address enforcement, which is problem. We all know it's a problem. And we had actually met with the mayor's task force on this. He has a task force just for this. And for years, we've been recommending that they have a special task force on bicycles, because a bicycle catching a bicycle, because police that are standing, or police in their cars are not the appropriate. I don't know how you do it. Everybody has yes been nodded and said, okay, that's great. We'll have special task force on bikes to help us enforce, and nothing has happened. We've talked to our elected officials, we've talked to the mayor's office. Anybody with half a brain knows that enforcement is our biggest problem. We also know it's a parallel path with infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big thing for the TA, Transportation Alternatives. It's for DOT. We are retrofitting our city that was built for cars for all the things that you point out. They're building more bicycle lanes, they're building wider bicycle lanes, but it's hard to keep up with the density of the bicycles. It all has to work together, it all has to be happening. Some of the things are happening, some of them aren't. My fear with this pilot program, which I'm not sure what we're all looking, to me, it seems a little bit clear. They just want to allow electric bicycles to ride in Central Park. I don't see anything bigger than that. But if you get back to, again, the infrastructures of the parks, whatever bike lanes there are will be shared with people riding, pedaling a bike, and those that are on electric vehicles. I think it's dangerous, and all the other stuff we don't have to repeat. But enforcement, there isn't an elected official that we have or a council person that we have, and the mayor's office that doesn't know that enforcement is a problem, but nobody has fixed it. And nobody, to the best of my knowledge, has implemented an idea that many of us have agreed on that would be helpful. Get a special task force on bicycles, have them roam around the city in different neighborhoods at different times, so it's,
Well, let's be specific to parks. Right now, for the,
Start with Central Park.
just specific to parks, and
okay, but whether it's in Central Park or.
I think, let me, so,
Enforcement, yeah.
I just wanna say a few words that, as someone who uses our parks a lot with my daughter and our family, I'm a little surprised at the discussion and the way it's come, but that's okay. And I'm proud of the members, and that's great. I think this is eerily similar to when the argument was against helmets. It's going to dissuade wearing helmets. It's going to dissuade people using bikes. I have a feeling that there's some of the conversation that if we're addressing here a safety issue, right? Or a park, or if someone just wants to enjoy the park. This is not condemning e-bikes. This is not condemning, people who use them. But I do feel that there are, I'm not saying in this room, I'm just saying that there are some that say, we can't even curb it a little bit, because then it's a condemnation on e-bikes entirely. I think that we are charged with listening to our community, seeing what's happening in our community. There is a blatant safety issue. And it's not even put the safety issue aside, which has been extreme. It's just an enjoyment factor of our parks being sacred. That's all, just our park. We're talking about parks here. We're not talking about throughways or blocks. We're just talking about parks. And I think some people might be hesitant to even say, okay, we can separate where there needs to be a safety, like no e-bikes here, but e-bikes here. And I happen to agree 100% with Christine Berthet on this. So I am going to take that for what it's worth, that there has to be better infrastructure across, the underground across, which could be included. But I will say I am a little bit surprised that we're finding excuses to not listen to be like, where the data, what to me, and I understand if people want data, but there is no data in the world that would tell me it's still unsafe to ride an e-bike in a park. What data would you need, or what data are we looking for that would say, okay, when I changed my mind, let's put the e-bikes in the park. There is no data. It's not like a this or that. This is about, and we are the Parks Committee. So and I understand some e-bikes are easier. I'm not saying people shouldn't use e-bikes. I use a regular bike. I make my daughter use a regular bike because I want her to exercise. But I think this is a safety concern, and I would just wish the committee would think about it. And I like Josephine's suggestion, but I would like the committee to compartmentalize.
I think everybody agrees that it's a safety concern.
But and then one more thing I want to say is with enforcement. To say that we need enforcement is true, but to say, well, there's not enough enforcement, so let them go in, they're not going to be enforced anymore. I think there were some that said, it's so hard to enforce. I think this is whether e-bikes should be allowed in parks or not. Yes, and I agree with Roberta, there have been some egregious where the e-bikes that have caused some of these problems were probably not going the speed limit, or they were on the sidewalk or whatever. If we are living in reality, that's not going to stop. You can have 50 enforcement bikes in parks, it's never going to stop. It's going to happen. I'm a big park enjoyer, and I get it if you want to ride a bike, if it's tough to go uphill a little bit, I think the payoff between the convenience of an e-bike and the safety and enjoyment of the rest of New Yorkers is, to me, this is me, in a park is not an equal balance. That's it.
But there's
anyway, so I will stop. I'm gonna stop, and that's just me.
There's also,
I will defer to my committee.
there's also a speed limit issue, and that applies to regular bikes too. I know, I'm looking at Ramo, and if there were a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and if it were enforced, I wouldn't give a damn if they were electric bikes or not.
Right, but I think Marty, the point, whether we had a lot of bicyclists on, I think the e-bikes are heavier, they do more it's a different, but I don't want to get into regular bikes, because that's now we're getting off on
You're
another.
raising some.
I'm with you, Leslie. You wrote a letter just the way you spoke it. I would be very happy. It's basically what.
Well, no, we're gonna.
Yeah.
Raoul, go ahead.
I'd like to suggest an enforcement idea. I don't know if it's been discussed in the task force with the city, but using technology, you could put on e-bikes a GPS kind of thing that would track whether.
We've
they
talked about with
enter
deliveries,
The park.
We have discussed that.
I'm talking about city bikes at this point.
No,
Just
I
just
know.
city bikes.
Yeah,
Give
I'm
me-
just telling you,
give me-
it's always also been discussed with our elected officials and the mayor's office.
Because,
We
you know, in
that.
city bikes, you have to put your credit card to
Yeah.
rent them. And if you put a GPS tracking device and you enter the park, it could be an automatic fine on your credit card that would very quickly dissuade you from entering the park again. And that's not too tough to install.
You can put those. But
And
I
that's
also,
so,
I
as an
just
enforcement.
want to go and listen, that this isn't about whether we're gonna enforce in Central Park, it's about whether we're gonna let them in, and you're right.
No, I mean, for enforcement. In
Yeah.
other words, someone violates it, they enter the park, they get fined right away on the.
I know a lot of people with personal scooters though. and-
Yeah, I mean, this would be enforceable only on the
Yeah.
rental city.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but let's get to.
And so it's a motion.
There's a motion,
Yeah.
and I think you actually, you tweaked your motion.
Yes,
So do you want to, go ahead, you do it, and then,
and make a motion to write a letter that we're very concerned about this pilot program for all of these different reasons. We've heard from community members about these very serious injuries, some resulting in death. And we want to know what this study is about, we're requesting more information, but at the same time, you know, we're not comfortable at this point with where this is going, right? The dangers, all, you know, everything that everybody said, basically.
and also asking if there is data that is being collected, and we are interested in that.
When is it coming? I mean, this could be 2 years from now. And all of the deaths, you know, the accidents can happen between now and then. So we need to really make it a strong letter that, you know, we're very concerned about this. These are parks are safe, should be safe havens. They are safe havens in the city. Pretty much all we have.
That's a little bit different, that letter's a little bit different than from the opposition to any pedal assisted or motorized.
Correct. We don't come out.
Because
She's
we have
saying-
several members here who would like to see data, and I understand
Yeah.
that because we have not heard from the Parks Department, right? We have not heard. So I'm saying that it would be great if we came out tonight with a very strong letter of consensus. I don't want us to walk out of here and half of us are voting yes and the other.
Yeah,
Would you include the abhorrent lack of enforcement in your letter? Or-
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
I would second Josephine's letter,
the new letter.
the new letter, and I think as a precedent, again, this is about process, and if we are going to make a decision on a program that's being run by a city agency without hearing from the city agency, I think there's something just a little bit wrong with that. And this is not like, personally, I am a pedestrian, I don't use bikes, I have no desire to use a bike, they seem very dangerous to me. But I think from a moral standpoint and for, you know, process, we should be talking with parks and telling them how concerned we are, you know, for all the reasons, you know, we've stated and we've seen, and tell parks, you need to give us this data and explain how you're enforcing this, because if you can't give us that, we will be inclined to oppose this program.
So just for clarification, so everyone does know, I'm sorry to mention this, I did write to Parks today, and I said this was, I did tell Parks before, this is on the agenda, I went right to Steve Simon, I said FYI, if you have any comment, you know, this is on the agenda. So we can then force them to come next month and have, you know, more of what you're saying, and actually that can be included in our letter.
And a date on it, like you want me next month, like we're not
Yeah.
gonna let this carry out for months that you don't show up, yeah.
Okay, does anyone else want to, I know you made a motion, it was seconded, does anyone want to add to the points of the letter, and then we can vote just to be comfortable, Roberta?
Just the infrastructure piece.
Oh, yes, I already have it written down, actually. Go
I
ahead.
just want to add, I mean, it's stated that the purpose of the pilot is to allow more New Yorkers to enjoy parks.
Right.
And it has an assumption that everybody would be respectful of others and operate their vehicles in a safe manner. That's clearly not happening. So I mean, it would seem like the pilot is not successful, we would love to see your assessment and data that would suggest.
I'm not
that it
gonna
is.
say that in the letter, but I don't.
Especially if someone can. And nobody's died yet, you know?
I like what Josephine said. I'm gonna take Josephine's words, if that's okay with everybody, we can vote on it, and like I said, please, you know, the chairs are the chairs, but we're only one person, like, we're only one opinion.
That's fine.
So, okay, that's what I'm, take a vote. So everyone with what Josephine said, what Roberta added with infrastructure, what Katie added with, and Matt with data, and am I missing anybody? Enforcement. Enforcement. And I'm gonna send it to Christine also, too, but I know I know how she's gonna, what?
And we'll all get to look at it.
I mean, no, we still have 2 more letters.
I know.
Okay, all right, everyone, please.
It's also confusing, I just want to be able to see what
All right.
comes.
It's unanimous, I'm not gonna go on.
Anybody opposed or objecting or voting not eligible, nobody's putting your hand up, so that covers.
All right,
I don't want to belabor, but I just because of what, she just did, I just have to tell you, one of the big things, and to your comment about data, which bill was just went through legislation, one of the problems is that nothing is reported, because people fall down, they break their wrist, cops don't come, the riders take off, so even if stuff is going on, we will never know.
yeah,
about
well,
it.
hopefully with Alex's bill, Alex Forrest has a bill.
Right.
Because you couldn't even check it in a box, there
Right.
wasn't even a box for
No, but
e-vehicle.
Brad just had it.
Yep.
It's not just about that, it's about informing also the pilot, they're gonna have another year, we can tell them what we
Yes,
hope to
that's a
see.
good,
Like, we wanna
That's a good
speak
point.
for.
That's a very good.
Like, if they're not collecting the data that we should help them understand like what they should be looking at, so I'm not expecting like
Right.
what everyone wants to see or not see, like, I'm expecting like we're not gonna see anything. And we should use this opportunity to help inform what we would like it, like, hey, we wanna see infrastructure, we wanna see enforcement, so it's not just about data, it's,
yeah,
it would be good to know. what
to
they're
say if there
collecting.
was
But, like,
infrastructure, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place.
Yeah, let's inform
Okay.
the pilot a little bit and see what's,
Um,
yeah, so anyway.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
They don't have any data from the police because it's not being reported, but emergency ones have data. So our
That just-
taxes have tripled.
That does just get into, again, if we're talking specifically about parks and this.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't separate.
I'm just saying,
You really gotta stay.
We don't know
But
about
let's-
it anyway.
I think we'll come to what Josephine said,
Yeah.
you know, I will, Josephine, I'm gonna rewatch this and take exactly what you said. Okay, let's go, I think let's go quickly for, Gateway. I wrote down all, and I'm sure Maria, you have some points too. But if anyone has any points that we should kind of, again, connect with Christine about. I think this is gonna be major, transportation for the most part letter with a, I don't want to say asterisk, but with a section for WPE. But let me know,
Yeah, well, one of the big points that was raised and discussed a bit was about the noise. They're supposed to get back to us on that, so that should be mentioned. What's the noise? What can we expect from noise there during the working hours?
And just to add to the noise point, they described things in some very technical, like audio engineer terms that while I understand what decibels are, it would be helpful to contextualize that with a sort of real life example, you know, this is as loud as a school bell, and whatever it is, so that people can be aware and understand, you know, what these impacts might look like.
anyone else? I'm also we're gonna talk about the art. Those are good things, this is a big thing, we're gonna talk about, I think it's very, very important that we have a community benefit out of this, and none was mentioned yet.
I had my hand up.
For that, oh, I'm
to say
sorry.
that, yes.
Alice,
At
oh,
the-
sorry, go ahead.
At the very end, when the numbers came out of how big this project is, $16 billion, it hit me on your question about what's in it for the community. Combine that with Christine's question about, is that bridge gonna stay there for the use of the community, right, as a bridge to cross?
Yeah.
I think there should be more for the community. Like, for example, could we move that bridge over to closer to 29th Street and make it more. Use it initially as a utility type bridge, but later to be converted to a pedestrian bridge.
That question was raised in one of the
Yeah.
meetings that we went to. And they said, no, this is being constructed strictly as a bridge to move materials. And it would have to be constructed differently if there are also going to be pedestrians on it. And what you're suggesting is construct it differently from the beginning.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's one thing, I mean.
As it, that will end up being, it can be used afterwards as a pedestrian.
So I brought up that
I mean, there's
exact,
$16 billion here, they can set aside.
yeah, so I brought that exact point up with them saying, can you know, a little extra money to give us an amenity at the end of it.
Yeah.
Hunter Park has some thoughts about a pedestrian bridge. So, you know, whatever, it doesn't have to be that, but yes, it has to be some amenity. Like, look at Port Authority Bus Terminal, they're giving us a bunch of stuff, you know, there's a few things that are not necessarily related specifically, but they're giving us 2 parks, a deck over, stuff like that.
A public pool.
Oh, that's right, you want the, I forgot, you want the, we could ask.
Need a big pool.
Honestly, I mean, this is billions and billions of dollars, they can come with a, you know, $1 million to give to something that we want, Alice.
At the construction stage.
Alice wants a pickleball court, no, sorry.
So at a very quick
Yep.
glance, there's going to be health challenges for those of us who have asthma or anything related. So even though I didn't ask a specific question about it, in quick glance, I think we should also ask them to be considerate of that as well.
The health changes.
Yeah, because,
Construction mitigation.
Yeah.
Dust emissions from construction.
Yeah. And then, was it oxygen, nitrogen, all that stuff we told you before. But overall, it will have adverse, health impact on those who already have health challenges.
In an area that already has.
That's in an area that's
Yeah.
one of the worst, you know.
Okay. I got that.
Can I have one more thing?
Yes.
Since we're talking about these long fences, what about, are they putting additional floodlights up? Because we already have safety issues and drug use, and so how are they keeping these areas like
Lit.
well lit and
For nighttime.
free of any trouble?
Do you want to do the gateway letter and I'll do the other 2?
Brad isn't here, so did I hear you say, solar power floodlights?
I'll take.
That's for the next letter.
That's it.
For the
Oh,
mayor.
do you want to do the gateway letter?
Right.
With Christine, or-
Well, I think
It's
there's
not a
not a
letter.
letter.
It's with
a
Christine.
conversation.
Down so that we're
Okay.
not having. like
Anything
these-
else with that? So we can move on to our last, it's a long meeting, I know, guys, thank you so much. Our last letter.
What was that?
I know. I was there 3 days ago. I mean, I have a lot of stuff on this one, so I know, but.
I was gonna say, you have a long.
The Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, which seemed like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But if anyone for that, oh, actually, I'm sorry, that has to be a motion. Because the other one is not a letter, Gateway's not a letter, right?
It's not a letter.
It's, it has to be a motion if we're gonna write a letter to, so if someone wants to make a motion that we write a letter to the new
No, wait,
office.
But Gateway is something that has to be submitted before we do the next meeting.
That's going, but transportation's writing that letter.
Yes, so we're just
We're
gonna
just gonna
submit
get-
our thoughts
That's
and,
fine.
yeah. Can there be a motion for
What's the motion
What-
for?
the letter to the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environment?
Saying thank you for giving us all these pieces of information.
Yeah, thank you, we're, you know,
Here's the list of information we got from you, A, B, C, D, F.
and what we're interested in our district, you know,
That's where the solar lights go.
that's what the, should we put that in there?
Yeah, I think so, actually.
Yeah.
And you talked about like,
Ways to,
capital projects and when parks comes in, and there should be like sort of a standard of environmental energy efficient things that they do across the plane, like we don't have to continue to ask them for solar lights every single time they come in with a new project, like it should just be part of the
standard, I
package.
like that language, standard environmental.
Yeah, and I think there were a few other things that people raised, like
There were a couple other, there were areas he felt like he couldn't talk about that he said he would set up for other people to come talk to us.
Yeah, I think one is going to be the DEP about the coastal, the new,
Yeah.
the new Deputy Commissioner for Coastal Resiliency from DEP. Who will come.
to Matt's point, one of the other, things that was discussed, I don't remember who, I think it might have been Sally, about taking the opportunity to increase street permeability
Right.
every time Con Ed did any type of work.
Yeah, that's what, yeah,
So that might be.
every time
something.
they pay, why are they not paying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a perfect opportunity to.
I mean, we can do a very long list of things that we're interested in, and we will. I think the overall, or the overarching point, and correct me if anyone disagrees, is that we're happy that you exist. We hope you have some teeth, really, to do things, like to actually, and we want to partner with you on a lot of these things for our specific district. I'm gonna include the EZC, the shore power, this.
We did a list of concerns, maybe we should include a version of that.
Okay.
Remember, we all saw it.
That's right.
Which one, which was,
A list of issues that we shared with the committee 2 months.
oh, the topics, yeah.
Yeah, that would.
This is like a free for, I mean, we could put in anything, really.
But that would arm your letter. I'll make sure you have a copy of that.
Okay.
Are we voting on this letter?
Can someone make a motion? I need someone, I can't make. a
Motion.
You can't make the motion.
No, I can't.
Oh, Matt, did you make a motion? I'll make a motion.
No.
Thank you, Al.
She meant me, I can't.
Great.
Okay.
All right, let's vote on everything we just said. All in favor for the mayor's office of climate.
Anybody objecting, abstaining, or anything like that?
Thank you, guys.
Anything like that is Robert's rules, come on.
Oh, you said you were gonna do update.
Do we want to?
Let's do it back.
I'll do a quick update, very quick. I had a meeting with EDC today. We talked about that park, that little section of the park. I said, listen, you gotta come and talk about shore power. They're hopefully coming in July. We talked about the community fund. We're gonna get further into it in July, hopefully. Pier 92, there's RFPs. They're still studying what the RFP is gonna be. That's really it. I mean, just that their EDC is gonna come and then hopefully in July. We need them sooner rather than later. Ports of America is gonna hopefully start their renovation. We'll talk about that, but that's gonna be kind of a big topic to chew on as well. And I gotta tell you, I appreciate this committee and thank you for taking up one, like that was a contentious issue. Thank you so much. I know it's tough. No, really, thank you.
Which contentious issue?
Which, yeah, the gateway. Someone second it. Thank you.